Warning, this podcast contains scenes of explicit nonsense and lore.
Previously on the Resident Evil podcast.
Hey, it's me again.
And in the same trailer they bring her back, they announce she's dead. So, awesome.
Somehow Spencer returned.
A lot of people who heavily invested in RE9 probably weren't even born when the original 2 and 3 came out.
But in terms of the hook, they've got me.
We could get Naomi McClane and then everyone will be happy.
If anyone wants to get in the mood for RE9, you need to dust off your copies of Umbrella Corps and play the police station level in that.
The Resident Evil Podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 104 of the Resident Evil Podcast, digging deeper into the lore than what the Los Illuminados dug for the Plagas, and more electrifying than an albinoid hooked up to a power station. I'm Nick, better known as Neptune. Let's see who's joining us today. He used to be a cop in Cumbria, now he's just a good-for-nothing guy who happens to be quite a lore man. It's the Batman.
Good evening.
Just like Umbrella, he's been sold off on the stock market. It's Stars Tyrant.
Hello.
And finally, hey, it's that Rob. It's Romby.
Hi.
Coming up on today's podcast, the original Resident Evil 4, ladies and gentlemen. It's 20 years old. A game that felt like an age to come out is now somehow 2 decades old. And as this is a happy birthday podcast, we've dusted out our old copies and gone through the game from beginning to end to share with you our experiences and feelings 20 years on. We'll also be catching up with all the latest news and ending with Neptune's Biohazard quiz. So let's start with the news. Resident Evil Requiem news, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, so after our last podcast, which obviously dealt with the announcement of Resident Evil 9, Capcom then decided to show a new showcase, debuting some more teasers from the upcoming game. The developers talking about the fear factor being an important element of Requiem, and also a really key point that they struggled with adding Leon. I think the original plan was to have Leon as a protagonist, but they found that he was a problematic character to have for horror, which is very interesting considering he was in the last game that we had with Remake 4. What was everyone's thoughts about this? And more importantly, we saw a little bit more of Renwood Hotel and the BOW that seemingly chases Grace.
I think the footage looked amazing for the game. Honestly, I do. You know, I find it a bit bewildering that we received some feedback saying we were quite negative in the last episode, where I felt we were overwhelmingly positive about the direction that the game's taking. And I'm only more on board now with seeing the sort of extended footage. I watched the extended ambassador video, which was put online, showed it a little bit more. I mean, if you had to nitpick it, it looks extremely similar to certain sequences in Resident Evil 7. But given how much I put Resident Evil 7 on a pedestal, more of that is not necessarily a bad thing. I just hope it's not too stalkery focused, where you aren't able to defend yourself. You know, like one-hit KOs and things like that, which I believe that some of the gameplay feedback that we got implied. But I'm fully on board with the game. We got a new glimpse at the main hall, which everyone was very excited about when I shared that on the podcast socials. You know, Grace obviously wheels. It looks like she wheeled a Walther PPK, which is very neat. I'm just totally on board with it. I just think it looks great. I think it's quite telling that all the sort of people on the Capcom staff on that video, the ambassador video in particular, talked about trying to recapture what made 7 brilliant. There was no mention of Village for some reason.
There's a reason,
but I think it's great, and I think the irony that they said they couldn't make Leon work in this environment when he was the very much publicly touted horror campaign for RE6 is delicious in retrospect. I think the only thing that I've found disappointing since this video was released is that people are taking the inclusion of Leon, mentioned as being a confirmation that he's going to be some sort of secondary character. And I just feel a little bit disappointed that, I don't know what this is really, but there's always a demand to explore what the legacy characters can do. And I feel that if you scrutinise recent projects, the legacy characters have kind of been let down a little bit, whether it's, Chris's sort of botched depiction in Village, Claire's very much sideline roles in, Infinite Darkness and Death Island. Rebecca, didn't really have much to do in Death Island either. Leon was kind of like just kind of there in Death Island. So the legacy characters haven't been overly treated too well, and that's why I think I'm really excited to see another new protagonist that kind of that has a link obviously with established history and lore in Alyssa. And I'm just a little bit disappointed that the fandom seemed to celebrate Grace for all of 2 minutes before it's like, right, rubbing their hands going, where's Jill and Leon then, where's Jill and Leon? And it's, come on guys, let's just actually embrace something new. You've had your remakes, you've had your fun, come on, let's see what some new, some fresh blood can do. And I understand that some people were kind of a little bit burned by Ethan having no face and, struggled with his personality. But I tend to think they're going to do something a little bit different with Grace. I think she's going to be explored a lot more in depth, and I'm really excited to see what they do with it. So yeah, I really love the footage. I think it was a very reassuring video for people like me.
I'm quite impressed. The focus on 7 and post 7 and not Village is not because Village was anything wrong. It's just because the development team that worked on this went from 7 into working on what was going to be 8, which is now 9. Village eventually, which was supposed to be a side story, became 8. Don't read anything into it. It's just the way things have worked out. And they've obviously started and gone over several ideas for this game, including the one that's shown in the footage that's on the Capcom website, which Sean was alluding to, that shows some test footage of an online open world kind of style game. Before even this all stuff got released as part of the showcase, they had, after the Summer Games reveal, they had behind closed doors visual demo for attendees, and some people also got to do hands-on with some of the demo, and it seems like a lot of the footage that we got to see from this showcase was from the same area from that demo. So been positive comments mostly from people who got to see it visually or hands-on. A few people feeling like they want more to get a better understanding, or noted it feels very similar to 7 in a lot of ways. Generally pretty positive. I can understand, the comment about Leon was like they can't have a protagonist who, if a lamp falls over and gets frightened at the crashing sound, Leon's not going to do that. So yeah, totally understandable there as well. I can see where Sean's coming from as well. Like, you've got a new character and you've got some established connection and it's got some interesting narrative, and really people are like, oh, Leon, Jill, what's happening, And of course, people were somewhat taking all the comments from the developers about Leon as like a reason for like, oh, he's going to turn up still anyway, because that's why they pointed out his involvement. So, okay, I don't quite understand that myself, but sure.
Big gaming news, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure you've seen it. A new Resident Evil game has been announced only a few days ago. We are very excited here at Resident Evil Podcast. Resident Evil Survival Unit. Yes, it's a new tactical kind of RTS game, and it's coming to mobile phones.
Just talk us through your emotional response to that announcement then, Nick.
It was pure unadulterated excitement. It was like, at last. And I say this I've never played an RTS game, and in fact, people who know me know I'm a big Star Wars fan. There's a big Star Wars RTS game coming out next year. I've never played them, so this is working out quite nicely because I can play this on my phone in Resident Evil. But more so than that, this is the first mobile phone game that's hit kind of Western audiences since, well, the last one was Mercenaries Versus in 2011, and if you don't count that, because that was just like a mobile version of RE5's Mercenaries mode, this is the first story-based Western Resident Evil game on mobile phone since 2009. Ladies and gentlemen, with Degeneration on N-Gage and Uprising on Java. Ages since we've had something.
My bold take on this is that with obviously RE9 not looking to continue the Village cliffhanger, you're going to get your resolution of BOW empowered BSAA in an RTS mobile game. That's where it's going to be. It's going to be all resolved in this little side title. You're going to have like a military unit that you have to control, in a top-down map that you have to invade BSAA Europe with your own team, and there's going to be little text files that flash out the story, and then that's it. That's that plot thread dealt with in a little mobile game.
I was going to say that would be great, except for the fact that it's got the old school Umbrella logo and it looks like Raccoon in the image. Sean, but
It's Raccoon
Yeah.
City. I'm pretty sure. It looks like it's... Yeah, you're right. The kind of promo image looks to be remake-style Raccoon City in the background. It looks like it's in Arclay Forest. There's an umbrella sign.
that has another one of your favourite little things, Nick, a reference to the Anderson films.
Does it?
Yeah, the tagline says, "Our business is."
Is this his life itself? Yes, it does. Well, that's not. Yeah, right, great. This is made by Joy City Corporation, which is a subsidiary of Sony. A new showcase is coming on the 10th of July. So depending on when this podcast drops, it may or may not have already been out. I mean, put that in your diary.
My favourite thing about the revealed video that they did was the fact that it's hosted by Shinji Hashimoto, who is infamous for back in E3 2014 for taking the stage on, I think it was the Sony showcase, and every single person in the audience thought, because he worked for Square Enix back then, was that he was going to announce Final Fantasy VII Remake. And it was going to be this massive moment, and he stands on the stage and he goes, "Final Fantasy VII, PlayStation 1 version is coming to PS4 and PC," and then they just literally exit the stage as quick as he arrived, and the entire audience was basically blue-balled, and just the devastation that was unleashed, like online and socials and everything. Everyone was so sure Final Fantasy VII Remake was going to announce that year, and all it was PS1 remaster coming to PS4, and that was it.
That's so good.
It was incredible. So the fact that when I clicked on the Survival Unit trailer and his face just popped up again going, "Hey, hello everyone," I was just thinking, oh, this is absolutely joyful. Please just tell us this is the continuation of the Village storyline and I'll be made up.
It could be. I mean, it could be the prequel you need for Requiem. I mean,
Tyler Hamilton.
Well, I don't mean to speculate. I mean, we've got an FBI agent going into Raccoon City, going to the RPD. I mean, there is a mobile game series that has done just that.
So you're looking forward to you're looking for a Survival Unit Requiem crossover content.
I think it might happen. I think if this is Raccoon City in its prime, or i.e., during 1998, I wouldn't be surprised if they drop some things in it. Final bit of news. Brandon Salisbury's amazing Resident Evil movie, George Romero movie documentary, is now available to stream free on YouTube. I think only if you're in the USA, but I think if he mentioned in his socials, if you change your region, you should be able to watch it.
You need a VPN, and I think it works if you're in the US or Canada.
Well, there we go. I'm sure lots of our listeners have that access, so you can watch it for free, hoping still for a proper release at some point in Europe.
Yeah, I saw Brian was commenting that I don't know, I don't quite understand the full details because I'm not involved with the sales side of things, but something to do with like the European distributor hasn't just done much except for the German release, and then sounds like that's also being bought out by another company, so maybe there's a chance it'll get a wider European release, and he's still hoping on getting a Blu-ray out at some point in the US, and that will likely be region free, being a release, and so people are able to watch it wherever.
That does finish all our news. Just a quick site news and Patreon thank yous to our new patrons who have joined us. So if anyone's interested, you can head over to our Patreon page. But a big thank you to Alfie Walker, David James, Linkmaster91, and Jonathan. Thank you very much for your kind contribution. Very much appreciated. That does finish the first part of the podcast. We now bring out the birthday cake and the candles as we celebrate 20 glorious years, and happy birthday to Resident Evil 4.
Leon, I hope you can hear me. I'm Ingrid Hunnigan. I'll be your support on this mission.
Loud and clear. Somehow I thought you'd be a little older. So the subject's name's Ashley Graham, right?
That's right. She's the daughter of the president. So try to behave yourself, okay?
Whoever this group is, they sure picked the wrong girl to kidnap.
I'll try to find some more information on my end as well.
Good. Talk to you later. Leon out.
Happy birthday, Resident Evil 4. 20 glorious years of one of the most important games in video game history. We're celebrating its 2-decade-long version with the only way we know how, a complete playthrough of the game beginning to end. Now, if you remember from the last podcast, we discussed the many, many versions that are available to play the original Resident Evil 4, so we'll quickly go through that, see which version everyone has played. Batman, what version did you take up?
I just played the standard PS4 version.
PS4, Romby?
was gonna make a joke that I played it on like the mobile or Zebo or whatever
Zebo,
the hell,
yeah.
but no, I played the PC port, which was the updated PC port from 2014 without any fan mods. It was terrible.
I played the Nintendo Wii version, which was a steep learning curve for myself. Stars Taran, I think you played the gold standard, really.
I played on a CRT, no less, the very original release of Resident Evil 4 on the GameCube. So this is the NTSC version, which I think was the first released, the very first released, and actually has a few things that were patched at a later date, not in it, such as like would change weapon values and things like that. So it's an interesting one.
There are other versions that could have been played, of course, as Romby alluded to. The Zebo edition, the Brazilian console, not available. The mobile version, not available, but alas. I think that's only quite a shortened version anyway. But let's begin then with... We can't avoid it, gents. That introduction. I don't want to dwell on it too long, but when you first loaded up that game for the first time, there had to have been that feeling of deflation with the stock market crash and basically, knowing that you are in a soft reboot because everything was back to basics, back to the beginning of the story in terms of what was going to happen. There was no Umbrella, no T-Virus. You knew that from trailers. Even now, looking back on it, especially since we've had like Remake 2 and Remake 3, it still doesn't fit easy with me just having Umbrella killed off screen.
I'm going to tell the honest truth here. In 2005, in January of 2005, when I played this, I didn't think that was going to be it at the start. You know what I mean? Like, I thought during the game narrative, some bits of that were going to get fleshed out. I honestly didn't realize that was going to be all we were going to get about what had happened. I knew it was a new story. I knew that there was going to be all this stuff, but I kind of thought that maybe little hints in the world or files or conversations would explain a little bit about that opening. I didn't think the opening by itself was going to be so self-inclusive.
Yeah, I'm with Rob there. I thought exactly the same when I booted it up for the first time. And I even thought it was maybe a ruse and that Umbrella was still going to show up, in like an underground capacity at some point towards the end of the game.
And you do get some hints between that, like with Krauser's comments and kind of knowing what's going on and what we eventually did get.
It kind of reminded me of, like we've spoken before about how Resident Evil and Resident Evil 2 follow the Aliens template. Well, this definitely felt like Alien 3, with it killing off all its cliffhanging storylines and just starting afresh in the same way they killed off Hicks and Newt and jettisoned everything that happened in Aliens and basically started again with just nothing but Ripley.
Yeah, it's hard to sort of explain because we've got a lot of listeners now who probably weren't even born when this game came out. And, as we've tried to talk about in the previous Happy Birthday podcast, like what that feeling in the series was when, the only games that had been released were 1, 2 and 3. We went through the 7 stages of grief when Resident Evil 4 came out. It was, all those we've alluded to in previous episodes, all those years of build up of characters in the, end credit scenes promising a big showdown. And, you can't even say like at the time it came out, we even had the Umbrella Chronicles fix because obviously that wasn't even invented yet. We didn't even have the Separate Ways Band-Aid at this point just to help us out. It really was a complete abandonment of everything that had come before, and it was hard. It was also having to come to terms with the fact that you were playing a very, very different Resident Evil game that was not tailored around skulking around the dark looking for key items. It was a completely different genre. It was a completely different approach. We had to accept the fact that we were playing a game without zombies, and a lot of the fandom didn't take that very well. It was big. As monumental and as timeless as the game has obviously become an industry game changer, the Resident Evil fandom, the community had to go through a lot of soul searching when it first came out. They really did.
On the plus side, it looked absolutely gorgeous. And as soon as the kind of sequence started in the car, you had never seen graphics like this before, and the GameCube was just on point. You had seen good graphics with Zero and Remake, of course, but seeing fully 3D rendered moving Leon, and then you start to walk out down the village and you see in this autumnal vibe, which we mentioned isn't really replicated in the remake as much, but this, the falling leaves, all seemingly random, the crows, and, just this inhospitable area that you're in that was quite bright for the time, but there was that feeling of unnerving, and it started off so strong as you were kind of going into that kind of opening area with the Ganado in the house.
What's going to be interesting as well as we break down and analyse the game is that this is the first Happy Birthday podcast that we're doing where the remake has already come out. Obviously, it's not going to be the purpose to compare them all the way through, but I think comments and notations and comparisons is going to be inevitable this time, which is really interesting. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. The vibe of the village, the opening sort of presentation, and that was just absolutely staggering at the time. You had never seen anything like this on home consoles. It was just a complete, overwhelming level of detail and atmosphere. It was the atmospheric things as well, like the fog, the haze that they managed to sort of use to its effect. It gave it like this really grungy, scrunchy feel that really went well with like the sort of grindhousey feel I think they were going for. The Chainsaw Massacre kind of approach. The sort of almost slightly rough nature of the visuals at the time only add to this experience. Masterful, absolutely masterful.
Back in 2005, we'd had, 9 years of fixed camera angles and T-virus and zombies, and even though we were all upset about the story, playing this game, it just felt so refreshing. And like you say, because a lot of the fans are so young, they weren't playing the games back then, they missed out on that kind of lightning in a bottle experience. And, you really resonated with Leon as well in some sense, because you were so used to just camera angles and the tank controls and shooting these slow-moving zombies, and all of a sudden you're swarmed by these fast-moving enemies that communicate with each other, that use tactical attacks. It's kind of like an overwhelming experience. It saved the series, in my opinion.
Almost certainly. It took me a while to get to grips with the Wii remote. In my old age of coming up to 40, the idea of needing to point the Wii remote at the screen is an annoying one. I'd rather just sit back and just chill and play, and getting back into this took me so long. But the Wii version is often heralded as I don't say the definitive version, because I don't think that's quite true, but it's the one that obviously it had things like separate ways on it. It had all the best bits of the GameCube version, and whilst it perhaps doesn't hold up as well on a big TV, I think if you played it on the CRT that had component, 480p with a Wii remote would probably be quite a good thing. But as I said, it took me a little bit of time, and even the first Ganado got me twice when I was playing, and I was so out of practice. A couple of reasons for that. One, the Wii remote. Imagine me going in and then aiming it, and then I was just going shooting right up to the sky, and I was like, oh god. But also, it's the engine. I am so used to the remake engine, and to kind of go back to, it is still tank controls, but in a kind of 3D space, and it's quite a unique setting, and Rob can testify how terrible I am generally when we co-op Resident Evil 5, which has the same sort of control scheme. It took me a long time to get used to this kind of point, stop, shoot, as opposed to that free movement that you get in the RE engine. I'm afraid to say that even in easy mode, which I was obviously playing, I've never completed this game in normal mode. It's beyond me. I think I was hit twice by the opening Ganado, which is shameful, but this is why we're here. You've spoken before in the past, Sean, about controls. Were you okay getting back to the if you've been playing the remakes a bit more, were you okay getting back to it, or take a little bit of getting used to?
I've never really stopped playing RE4 over the years. I've actually streamed like the HD project a couple of times, but I was actually doing better than ever because I'd forgotten just how intuitive that GameCube controller was with it. The aiming just felt absolutely perfect on that analog. Better than any version I think that's come since. And obviously you circumvented that with the Wii remote, but certainly with like a traditional controller to analog experience, like those GameCube analogs are still absolutely amazing, and they just seem so perfectly mapped to Leon's aim that it just made it intuitive and easy. I was pulling off headshots so simply that, and I wouldn't necessarily say I struggle on other versions, but it just felt easy. Like, within a couple of minutes of that opening village battle, I was totally locked into the tempo and the flow of it, that I wasn't even thinking about anything to do with the controls really. You were just in the zone, and it was a joy.
Batman, how about you going back to this classic?
It was the first time I'd revisited it since the remake had come out, and I really enjoyed it. The thing that struck me was how fluid it felt. Like the remake, even though it was really, really good, it sort of felt a little bit sluggish in terms of its controls and movement. And this just feels really fluid and just completely free roaming. I also was completely struck by, like you've already mentioned, the brown colour palette and the autumnal setting. The pointed trees with no leaves on and all the golden brown leaves on the floor. I really, really missed that from the remake. But the opening of the game, it eases you into it with that little trail up to the village. There's a few traps in the trees. I rescued the dog.
Yeah.
Threw grenades at the crows to get as many early pesetas as possible. and the opening village siege is just as effective as it was 20 years ago. Many Resident Evil games since have tried to replicate it, and it just hasn't come close to that original experience. Even the remake, as fantastic as it was, the original is just so much more effective, in my opinion.
Romby, you said you played the terrible version of the PC. What controller did you use for this?
I've got an Xbox controller, so it was a bit touch and go as I got used to that. Not fun.
No.
I'm just out of practice. I don't PC game very often. I have a laptop that's capable, though it still had some issues with the PC version of this. But yeah, I didn't struggle as much as you did with the Wii remote, but it definitely was a bit of a learning curve. And I'm kind of happy that you have this kind of like ease into it. But then you end up inevitably at the village with a bit of a panic, I guess, when you're not used to controls again. But I can't stress the same sort of things, even though I'm playing a version that doesn't look as nice as they tried to HDify, and it's better than the original PC port, but it's still based off the PS2 version. And unless you mod it with all the PC versions, which obviously someone like Sean has done and played before, which looks amazing, it definitely is still very much rough around the edges in a lot of way for something that was supposed to be an upgraded version. But other than that, the style and theme still comes through, and it's definitely got an atmosphere that the remake has. I don't want to say is missing per se, but it's definitely got its own unique style, which means they're very different. And I guess that goes hand in hand with what we've talked about before with all the reimaginings of things. It's a reimagined version of those events. So, it changes the time of day, it changes the lighting, it changes the types of trees and environments when you start the remakes version of events. So yeah, it's interesting was going back and seeing those through these eyes as also much like John, the first time I've gone back to this version since the remake came out. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't easy, but it was fun. And I can definitely say there's definitely a difference in responsive controls as well.
Well, let's talk about the entirety of Chapter 1. We can't not talk about, and it's already been alluded to, it is, in my opinion, even though I'm not a massive fan of Resident Evil 4, the opening siege, as John suggested, is still probably the best opening level of a Resident Evil game. Not every game has an opening level. I'd put 0 kind of has one, and that's up there, but every game since has an opening section. This was the first, and it remains one of the most petrifying, panicky, oh my god, what am I doing scenes, and I was impressed at how well it still kind of holds up. I like the fact that you go in and you get your binocs out and you have a look and you see the burning police officer on the spike and something's not right. And you are given options, perhaps less so than remake, but you're kind of going, well, I could go left or I could go head on. No matter what happens, you can't delay that inevitable. I mean, I've done it many, many times. I'm intrigued to hear what everyone's tactics are with this. Did you go to the building? Do you barricade yourself in? Do you go gun-ho? Do you try and, out-survive the bell ring? What's everyone's modus operandi for this siege?
I always go straight for the shotgun, even though it's going to trigger the chainsaw guy. After getting the shotgun, I knock the ladder down to stop him from coming up, and then I will jump out of the side window onto the roof. And then I tend to just stay in the main square. I know it sounds quite boring, but I don't want to be closed in. I don't want to go in a building and get trapped inside, because that's what makes this section so effective. There is no safe areas. You go in a house, they'll swarm you and start knocking the door down. You go up the bell tower, they'll start throwing Molotov cocktails at you. You hide on the roof of a building and they'll throw axes and farming tools at you. There's literally nowhere to hide. So I just like to sort of stay in as much open space as possible and just keep running around. And it wasn't as hard as I remember. I mean, I was only playing on normal mode, to be fair. It didn't last as long as what I thought, because I didn't actually kill that many enemies. I had it in my head that the bells triggered after you'd killed a certain amount of enemies, but it's obviously a timer. But, as fun as it was, I didn't find it too taxing this time around.
I'm like you, I go straight for the shotgun, barricade myself in, give a little bit more time, run upstairs, get the shotgun, knock the ladder down, jump out the window, try and take out as many as I can from there. I then jump back down. I went for the cow, and that didn't end well. The cow kicked, and I was like, there's an explosive, isn't it, above the cow? I was trying to entice Dr. Salvador that way, but yeah, the cow kicked me straight back into the main square. I was like, okay, all close to it, but that was okay. I ran there, but you're right, John. You can get stuck if you're not too careful. And I think there's a house near one of the gates I ran to, I think near the back, and kind of hid out there before making a run for the bell tower. And I think by the time I got up to the ladder, the bell had kind of rang, and that survived my encounter. I was quite pleased I did it first time. Yeah, subject to the cow, I was okay. But Sean, what's your general tactics for this one?
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I've got this so well rehearsed now. I tend to stay in the centre square and just occasionally like kite the Gyarados round the perimeter if it starts getting a bit overwhelming. But I mean, I just mainly just headshot, melee, melee the group, punch a hole in, and then just rely on the pickups. For handgun ammo to get you through it. I'm not entirely sure what the criteria is. I don't know whether there's a timer, but if you also dispatch a certain amount before the time's up, then it ends early, I think. But yeah, I don't even bother grabbing the shotgun or anything. And if you are fairly quick with, getting that routine down of like, headshot, melee, they go down really fast. And then you can just hoover up everything at the end with no danger of chainsaw guy. Some people would probably say that's, not getting the full experience, but I've had the full experience so many times, really. I will just quickly address what John said as well. I do think there is a very clear distinction between this and the remake in terms of Leon's movement. I think the remake goes for a lot more sort of realistic momentum. Everything sort of feels heavy, and Leon can't change direction very quickly because he kind of has a natural inertia about him where he has to sort of stop and start up again and turn. This feels like an arcade game in comparison, and I mean that in a really good way. But there's no real sense of realism. Leon sort of just glides around the area very smoothly. Like the hit detection and the responsiveness is so pinpoint and razor sharp that it is very much in inverted commas, a video game, isn't it? Whereas, you could say the remake leans for a bit more realism in places, and this almost feels like a score attack kind of game. It sort of invites you to just, get the context sensitive melee actions as quick as you can. And I think the gameplay loop is incredibly satisfying, and nothing highlights that more than the opening village siege.
Rumby, what about you? What's your approach to this one?
For this particular time, I tried to do my secondary roof tactic, because as John mentioned, they do throw stuff, but if you go around to the roof with a shotgun, you go through the door and trigger the chainsaw man, and you come around to the side roof. There's a gem up on there, and you're kind of slightly obscured, although not 100% free from being hit by things. But you can kind of sometimes pin yourself closer to the wall, and everyone funnels along the walkway at the top through the windows, which allows you to take them out. But you only have a limited ammo, and eventually, if you run down and pick stuff up, you eventually have to jump off the roof and sometimes loop around and do it again. My other tactic is something you can't do in the remake. It's one of those mechanics they kind of got rid of, which was to kind of play with Ganados on the doorways, because you can obviously hit doorways and shoot doorways and so forth. And so sometimes I will use that. The cabin that's closest to the central area, there's bombs inside. I think you can use the doorway sometimes to follow them through, and they don't tend to come through the other way so easily. Although if you go into the other room, they do smash through the window, but I notice they don't tend to do that straight away. So I use that to dispatch a reasonable number of them and kind of keep them at bay if the numbers start getting too high. But you can only use that for so long. But yeah, I went for the roof tactic this time. I very much agree with Sean's comment also about the gameplay style. I think the development team really relied on two elements that really had led to that, which was Dino Crisis 2's kind of snappy gameplay combo system and Mikami's own PN03, which really focused on this very tight, responsive, snappy video game response, which I think both belay the action, arcadey, score pointy feel to the original game that the remake definitely jettisons for more realism.
And this was interesting because this is the first time after you completed it, you get the famous line from Leon, "Where did everyone go? Bingo!" And you kind of get the title screen. It felt very cinematic. Something that the series hadn't really done outside of perhaps closing cutscenes or opening cutscenes. It's kind of, I thought it elevated the whole introduction again. Welcome to Resident Evil 4. This is what you're up against. I just think it served as a perfect kind of introduction, with having the title screen kind of come up at that point. And of course becomes the title screen every time you load up the game going forward. I thought that was a nice touch. Well, I wanted to talk about the blue medallions as well. Another new concept as you kind of leave and go in towards the farmyard area. I remember picking it up, the note. Again, that was quite new to Resident Evil, wasn't it? The idea that you just go and shoot random things. It felt almost RPG in that sense.
Yeah, or arcadey, like a light gun.
Or even arcade. Yeah. It's something that obviously they've done many times. Well, as the series going on, there's always hidden Mr. Raccoons and all that kind of thing. This is where it all kind of started, and you get the gun, don't you? Is it Blacktail? I don't get it anymore, but
from the merchant.
Yeah,
I think it's called the Blacktail. Yeah,
the Blacktail. Okay, so that leads into. Sorry, we're going to have to skip quite a lot, but I don't know if anyone had any interesting stories from the farm or the village going up. Oh, QTEs.
Oh, yeah, the boulder.
How can we forget the boulder? Again, a very popular thing at the time, but a brand new thing for Resident Evil. I mean, obviously it's not difficult, but going back to QTEs again, it's not really a thing now in a lot of the RE games.
The funny thing is, I always forget about the boulder sequence until it's literally tumbling behind me. There's a sort of cheat you can do on the non-professional game modes. Interestingly to note as well, the GameCube doesn't have a difficulty select at all. It's just the default at this point. I don't think it was until the PAL release where they added difficulties.
I
think that came with like the patched version that came after the original US and Japanese version. But yeah, there's always 4 buttons in contention with the QTE. It's either the 2 shoulder buttons or B and A on a GameCube controller. If you're not quite sure what it's going to be, you can just press all 4 as soon as the prompt comes up and you will pass whatever. It's only in professional will you actually fail if you press the wrong button.
Oh, so, really?
Yeah, just mash. Just mash all of them. That is a guaranteed success for the knife fight later, unless you're playing on professional, obviously. Safe to say that I Indiana Jones'd it, Nicholas, and I got away.
I'm sure not to correct you, but I'm pretty sure the Japanese version of the GameCube original has an easy and normal difficulty selection.
Interesting. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I don't actually own that version, so that's cool.
I think it's just one of those classic things where typically they've been offering easy options in Japanese titles up until that point where they could. I was going to say that PC version of that Boulder event is, well, any QTE really is beholden to the idea that the keys, the key options, if you're not using game controllers, I'm glad I was using a controller. I don't know if Sean can allude more to this because I haven't played it with a keyboard, but yeah, I've heard that can make things interesting if you're using a keyboard.
I actually never have, I've only ever played it on controller on PC.
That's probably a good thing because my understanding is that it might give you random keys.
Oh, God.
So you don't know which ones you're going to have to hit. I mean, from a perspective of QTEs, at the time this game came out, it was very much in the midst of what I'd call QTE fever. There was so many games with QTEs. It was still early enough, I would say, in the mainstream area where Resident Evil 4 didn't feel that difficult to have included it. It kind of made sense for where we were going at the time, but it just shows you how quickly by the time Resident Evil 5 came out, and a few years later, the whole industry had played out QTE so quickly that I just remember going, could we have made Resident Evil 5 without them? And definitely by the time 6 came around, it was a little bit like, really, we're still doing this? Like, you haven't come up with anything better?
I see Resident Evil 6 as kind of like the last final insult of QTEs as well. Had so many and they were all terrible, and after that, the industry felt like it kind of moved away. Resident Evil 6 kind of killed it for everybody. It was a bad idea when Capcom actually have like accessibility modes and stuff in the re-releases where you just turn them off altogether and the game will auto-complete them for you. We really have just moved away from it.
In the first chapter, we do meet after Leon is infected and meets with Lewis. We do meet with the merchant. Again, a new kind of mechanic that was being introduced to the series for the first time. And I have mentioned this before, but this was the point where I went, oh, the whole game's like this. Because up to that 1.1, even after the village siege, I'd kind of gone, okay, this is cool. This is survival action horror. I get this. This is intense. I like this. It's a different type of horror. I had naively assumed it was going to slow down to what we're more used to with Resident Evil. I kind of gave 1.1 a pass playing it for the first time. And I just had these flashbacks doing this version of that feeling of when you see the merchant, you come out of that hut and then you get the little kind of cutscene looking over the, I don't know what it is, the gorge, isn't it? It's like a gorge type thing. And then just remembering 20 years ago going, this is not going to let up, is it? This is the game. And there was that wave of, I don't say disappointment, but that wave of this is not what I personally wanted from a Resident Evil game. So as soon as I get to 1.2, I'm transported back 20 years to that feeling of, I'm not sure I'm going to enjoy this as much as other people will. There's nothing wrong with 1.2. It's fine. The whole thing's fine. It's just that was my realization point that, okay, we're playing something different here.
I must say, if there's one sort of single thing I don't like about 4 and 5 in particular, is the weapon upgrade system. I just think it's nonsense. I think Resident Evil, up until this point, has always, aside from the fantastical weapons like the linear launcher or the charged particle rifle, I've always liked the level of detail to real life weaponry, and I've always found it to be, I've always found like the weapons and the guns to be very well modelled. They're all, obviously at this point they were still, no, I think this is one of the first games that didn't actually have like licenses from firearm manufacturers, so they're just literally called handgun instead of Berettas and stuff like that. But yeah, up until this point, like I always felt like the games were modelled, fairly accurately on real life weaponry. That the magazine sizes. Forgive me if I'm saying the wrong term, Americans. I don't know what you call these things, but like clips and magazines and things like that all had the correct amount of ammunition and things like that. And then by the time you get to Resident Evil 6, you've got shotguns that can have 99 shells loaded into them, and it just felt like it was almost a step too much in terms of reality breaking. It just felt ridiculous. I've got a handgun with 50 bullets in it. It just, come on.
I suppose the whole point now, we're kind of heading up towards the end of 1, 2, and where we go, heading kind of towards the kind of lake area. Did anyone have anything remarkable happen at this point during their playthroughs?
Not so much, and I do want to try and avoid like comparisons all the way through, as I said, but one of the things that did really strike me, and this is a tick for the remake, is how much more of a real world place the village feels in the remake versus this. Like, it's almost the original version now, despite the fact that the aesthetic I think is so much better in the original game, the really sort of muted browns and things like that really, really do give this game a sense of unease and just an unrivaled atmosphere. But the layout of the village and the subsequent levels do just feel so video gamey. It feels absolutely implausible, some of the layout and stuff like that, whereas I do think that some thought was put into the remake to make it more cohesive, more of like a real place. I don't know about you guys as well. I don't know whether this is because of the GameCube version before it obviously had a lot of the changed weapon values and things, but I was really struggling for ammo at one point. Like I was really, really low on everything for a small duration on the run up to Del Lago, really.
Any problems, Bats?
I decided to buy a sniper rifle from the merchant, and I found it quite addictive, taking headshots in the gorge area. I actually thought the Ganado just kept coming relentlessly, but I must have killed enough of them that it stopped and the music went away and I could just explore the area. The only part I found a little bit tricky was when you make your way to the chief's house and you sort of go through that crumbling collection of sheds, and Ganados pop up with the dynamite, and if you don't get your timings right, you can get stun locked, and it's just horrible.
There's always one left. There's always one left, no matter how well you do it. That bit is a frustration as well.
And the bear traps all over the floor.
I think going back to Sean's point earlier about the balancing, I think they definitely made some changes to every other version after the GameCube version in regards to like resources. Because I do remember in the original version playing through that, having that same struggle back in the day, whereas I feel like there's a lot more drops early on in the versions I've ever played since. And hearing this now and thinking about my version of events, I feel like I didn't struggle too much, and it doesn't sound like either of you did either, and I feel like that's definitely something that got patched and rebalanced a bit in later versions from the PS2 era onwards.
Leon, I've been able to get some new info that might help you.
Fill me in.
Apparently, there's a religious cult group involved. They're called the Los Illuminados.
Los Illuminados? That's a mouthful. Anyway, I had an unexpected run-in with the big cheese of this village.
But you're okay, right?
Yeah. But he could have killed me, but he let me live. And he mentioned something about me carrying the same blood as them. Whatever that means.
Carry the same blood. Huh. Interesting.
Anyway, there are more important things than solving riddles right now.
You're right. Hurry and find that church, Leon.
Can you remember what your reactions were like 20 years ago with I know it's an optional cutscene, but when you go back into the chief's bedroom and you are saved by the woman in the red dress? Because obviously most people thought Ada was dead at that point, even though it's obviously her. I remember that was the first moment where I thought, oh, hang on, I am still in the Resident Evil universe.
For my shame, my first time through, I missed it.
Yeah, I think I did too.
Never thought to go. The game was always felt like it was pushing you to go forward, that I never thought to just go back on that particular occasion.
I think I did because I kept exploring every area, and so I was like, oh, hang on, did I miss anything? And ended up with that cutscene. I think, unfortunately for me, I think somehow it had been spoiled. Like, I got the US import version and it arrived kind of like the week after its US release. I think I bought it through Play Asia or something like that. And I remember that had kind of been, I wouldn't say spoiled, but I'd been told that Ada appeared. So, or found out something. I can't remember exactly what. So I think that had taken away some of the surprise. Otherwise, I was probably somewhat surprised that she appeared so early, considering it seemed very solo at this point, and there hadn't been a lot of. This is really only where the narrative had started to kind of start picking up again.
Now you mention it, I don't remember doing it. I remember the first time I saw it was in separate ways and going, oh yeah, and I was like, and I remember going, I don't remember this bit with Leon. So no, I didn't do it the first time, and I don't think I did it this time either. I should have done. This leads us all nicely into the first boss fight of Chapter 1 with Del Largo, and again, there's a nice optional cutscene here, isn't there? With if you shoot the water, quite famous, you can be killed straight away. I wonder how that was ever found out. I don't know why anyone would.
Because you can shoot fish.
Shoot the fish, yeah.
Ah, you go for the fish. That's why. Ah, okay, yeah. Del Largo was like the first kind of boss fight that felt so different to anything we had seen before in Resident Evil. It felt like a set piece. Something that becomes a bit more of a staple with the series as it went on from here. You can't replicate this again. You can never get on a boat and pick up a harpoon and just start firing it. And I would say set the standard, because I think the first big real fight was El Gigante in terms of wow. But what did everyone think of Del Largo going back to it? How did everyone get on? Any amusing deaths?
Well, I didn't find him too hard, but I think it's much more effective in the original. I think the remake missed the trick because he can't knock you out with a boat. Because I'd kind of forgotten. I collided with a tree stump or something and I went flying out the boat, and you have to swim back with him chasing after you. And that's quite panic-inducing. And I remember in the remake I was feeling quite disappointed that he can't do that at all. But yeah, I mean, there was nothing too taxing about the fight. The thing that struck me was just, again, going back to the graphics, just how much more sinister and macabre the lake area looks compared to the remake. You know, all that sort of dirty, murky water that's full of peat and the sort of mist in the air. It's just so much more effective. But the Del Largo as an enemy is just a load of bollocks, isn't it, really?
Your boat full of infinite harpoons.
Exactly, yeah.
There's a quote for your opening for the next episode.
I will say, though, I say this goes to the graphical thing. Despite how stupid Del Largo is, because it is supposed to be like a giant salamander, that's about as much explanation as we ever get. It felt like it belonged. Do you know what I mean? The way it was rendered, I suppose, in the lake, and looking at the kind of graphical composition, the surrounding kind of forest area and the kind of cliffs that kind of go around it. For something so fantastical, and I think some of the other creatures perhaps fall foul of this, this one felt quite natural, organic within the area that it was in.
Yeah, it's grounded enough, isn't it?
Just about. Just about. I would have preferred a shark. Of course I would have preferred a shark, but, you know, a salamander. I mean, considering this was the second salamander in the series, first one being the albinoid, it's a marked difference of what it was. I, too, hit the tree stump and then ferociously tapping on B or Z. I can't remember which one it was. Go, get out. I was killed at this point. It took a few times just to get it right. Again, it was getting used to the aiming and getting on board. But yes, you could throw it infinite times to help getting along. And this was the first time as well in a Resident Evil game where you had that kind of continue point, if you like, as opposed to historically you would die and you'd go back to the last time you saved with an ink ribbon, you know, and this had the you know, you could just do this fight again, which has become again a bit of a hallmark of the series, which is very in line with a lot of the video games.
I think Gun Survivor 4 did it first with the final boss. I think if you die to the final boss, you don't have to go back to the last save room. You just literally resume from, you know, the actual light gunny shooty bit when the timer's counting down.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Yes, that's
so that's another reason why we've called, you know, on the podcast for many years, haven't we? Now, like, it's kind of like, you know, Survivor 4 is like the proto RE4 in some respects.
How does everyone feel? I mean, looking back, I mean, we probably covered it in our RE4 retrospective podcast, but the lack of ink ribbons, the lack of saving, and that element of the game being completely removed.
I think it just came with a change of genre. What purpose would have ink ribbons have added, really? You know, you could even argue at this point typewriters aren't really necessary. You could have just relied on the continue and checkpoint. They almost just felt like they were a formality at this point, because obviously they're abandoned completely by the next game. They are just basically an updated continue point. Yeah, just a nice carry on from what had come before. banging safe room music though.
How did you get on, Sean, with Del Largo?
I'm pretty sure I had my first death here. I really struggled with it. The damage, whenever you collided with any of like the tree trunks or anything like that, seemed to just do so much damage. And if he knocks you off the boat while you're on low health, he starts from a much closer point, Del Largo, and will nearly always get you. Because I don't think you can heal when you're in the water, so you've got to get back to the boat. And in most cases, if you end up in like flashing red, you've really got to mash that button. Because if people aren't aware, it's a QTE. So you fall into the water, and you've got to mash a button on the controller to make Leon swim faster to get back to the boat. Well, if you landed in the water and your health bar is flashing red, it's brutal. It's nearly impossible.
Rob, what about you? Any deaths? Or are you going to be the saviour?
No, I died here too. Just getting used to it again. I wouldn't say it's the easiest balance, and it is that thing about being knocked out of the boat. If as Sean just alluded to, that if you're low on health, it doesn't help. Not the easiest experience. Yeah, I've never been a fan of this fight. I don't know why. Even back in the day, I was a little bit like the idea of it. I kind of like, but the actual execution, I've never enjoyed. So that hasn't changed. It's one of my low points in the game, to be honest.
Before we move on to Chapter 2, I just want to give a bit of a shout out to the Yellow Herb. I think that was one of the best additions to the RE lore, if you want to call it that. I think if you're going to have a health bar system like you do in RE4, I think the idea that your overall health can increase, I think was quite a nice little touch. And having the Yellow Herb be integrated into all the pre-existing red and green, I thought was quite a nice little touch. And I'll be happy to see that come back in the future, along with what they do in Remake 2 with the blue herb. That's not been repeated since, I don't think. Gives you a little bit of immunity, doesn't it, if you use a blue herb, as well as curing poison, which I thought was a good idea. But anyway, yes, I do like the Yellow Herb of increasing health, and you get enough, I think, throughout the game to totally maximise your health bar. And I like the idea later you can kind of like switch, but I'll give that one to Ashley and help her, because she's quite a lot weaker, so I thought it was quite a good idea. Anyway, Chapter 2. Sean, you've mentioned this a few times with regards to the beginning of Chapter 2 and the introduction of the new Ganado. How did you find coming back to that kind of, the night scene and the rain?
I've got to say, the GameCube version, I think, still looks the best outside in the rain at night. Those visuals are unbelievable. I tried to take some low quality phone videos because obviously recording off a CRT is next to impossible. If you're only using like a phone, you need to, match the frame rate of the refresh rate of the monitor and stuff like that. And otherwise you get, like a moving line going down the image. And even then it just did not do it justice. The rain in the GameCube version, honestly, people just take this kind of stuff for granted now when you've got really good rain effects in a game. But, short of like this or Metal Gear Solid 2, rain didn't look that great in games back in the day. And this was the first time which really captured that feeling of just like being outside in the dark and soaking wet. I actually boarded back on the boat to go back to get the optional hidden cutscene.
That's of the Caminos, isn't it? You can go back and...
Yeah, I made my own fate, and I think I died. So it's completely optional, and I think I had my second death here, and I just thought to myself, why have I just done this? So stupid. But I think this is another section where I would say the original gets this so much better than the remake. I think the outtime night scenes in the original are still quite unnerving now. And that audio track that they go through it, like that kind of string instrument that gets, louder as the Ganados turn up with the parasites sprouting from the head. And what a moment that was back in the day. Because not only was that like a freaky new thing in terms of, like grotesqueness and whatnot, but it also changed the dynamics of how like I personally had been playing at this point, where, go for a lot of headshots and melee. Now, going for headshots is almost, it's
punished.
Another risk factor. So they really did think of everything. There is a reason why this game is, looked back on as fondly as it is, because, no stone is left unturned in terms of it being a gameplay experience.
Particularly enjoyed the animation of that Ganado coming towards you. It's the fact that you don't even shoot it. It's like it's quite janky, isn't it? He's kind of like vibrating on the spot. And you genuinely feel that it just bursts out. The host had absolutely no control over it, and I think that worked phenomenally well.
It's definitely got like Thing style elements to that kind of convulsions kind of
yes.
style. I think what they're really going for.
Yes, you are right about the rain as well, Sean. Yeah, I mean we'd had good rain in RE0. That was particularly impressive. But again, this is again 3D moving rain. Leon's getting damp as he's walking, through it. You can feel the atmosphere, and it changes the whole complexion of where you've been. That autumnal feel's completely gone, and you got the fire sticks and everything's coming at you, and it's all a bit more Yeah, I like it. It was good start to chapter 2. Batman, what about you? Did you like the beginning of this
Yeah,
point?
I thought it was wonderful, as you guys have already said. I thought the atmosphere in the nighttime scenes with the thunder and lightning and the rain was just exceptional. I mean, I don't want to jump ahead, but I've always thought when you rescue Ashley from the church and you make your way back through the village and the rain is just drizzling and there's mist in the air and there's not too many enemies around and there's just that little subtle monotone soundtrack in the background, and that for me is one of the best atmospheres in a Resident Evil game since the original, I would say. It's absolutely fantastic. But in terms of my playthrough this time round, I'd got the blue medallions and I got the blacktail from the merchant for free, so my quest was just to upgrade that to maximum as soon as possible. I sold my sniper rifle because I knew the semi-auto rifle was going to be available soon, so I was going to save myself for that. Obviously I knew the parasites were going to come out at night, so I started just shooting the ganados in the legs and running past them. I didn't get the optional cutscene with the Colmeos, I just went the standard route up the hill back towards the church, and even though you don't get a cutscene, you can just see the first one in silhouette stood at the top of the hill just watching you, and you can see its red eyes. It's really creepy. But they're a lot tougher in the original, the Colmeos. They were quite easy to dispatch in the remake. We fight El Gigante, don't we, before we get to the church?
Yeah, he's now.
Yeah, obviously the wolf came to assist me with that. I didn't find El Gigante to be too much of an issue. I used to jump on his back and use the knife to stab him. Only takes 3 attempts on normal mode. But the biggest issue I got with this entire chapter was when I got to the church and I tried to jump across on the chandelier. It took me about 15 minutes to crack it. I don't know, I just had a complete brain fart. Everything I tried, I just couldn't jump across to the other side off this bloody chandelier. I think I had to go on bloody GameFAQs to find out how to do it.
What was wrong with it?
Well, I don't know. It's just like Leon jumped on it and then it swung and I thought, right, jump. And then Leon just jumped to the floor and I thought, oh, maybe I have to wait till it swings back and then do it. And he jumped to the floor again. And I don't even know how I did it in the end, but Christ, it was frustrating.
That's the real boss of these games. The chandelier, the chandeliers in the castle.
Yeah.
That they took a few attempts. Again, it was down to the remake again. It does it automatically.
Of course, yeah.
I can see people on the Discord right now already preparing their memes of like chandeliers right now, of like the hardest boss in Resident Evil history or something like that.
Let's talk El Gigante then. This was a talking point, wasn't it? Let's be honest.
They have a cave troll.
They have a cave troll.
Wondering who was going to bring that up first.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Sure.
I'm the same with bats here. I had the help of the dog. I tended to hide a lot in the buildings to get all the stuff. That was my general tactic. It was like avoid him, stock up as much as I can, and then I think I used the flash grenades, so he covers his eyes. Once I'd hit him enough times and the plaga comes out, I then tend to use the sniper rifle. But now you're saying the knife might be a little bit more effective in doing it if it only takes 3 attempts. That was my tactic, and I got stamped on a few times, but thankfully not killed. But I did use up most of my health in this one. He remains a contentious creature because I think this was, up until this point, everything was explainable, and this is something that Resident Evil always has been. Despite it being ridiculously science fiction at times, there always was a degree of T-virus plus human equals zombie, T-virus plus the plant equals ivy, T-virus and DNA or make tyrant, whatever. There was some justification, and so far we'd had human plus Plagas equals Ganado, Plagas plus Salamander equals Del Lago. El Gigante for me represents the first time that it's hard to justify how this was created, and even up to the remake, it's never really mentioned. I think the remake gave it a little bit of backstory with regards to as a child, it grew at a tremendous pace, if I'm remembering the file or something like that. But you don't really know what made it particularly special, how it was made, why it was made. The fact that they could create 3 or 4 of them relatively easily suggests that there was a process to making an El Gigante, but you're never given that traditional Resident Evil file that would say, oh, today we decided to take a whatever and mix it with this, and look what we've done. And I still pinpoint El Gigante as being the first problematic creature that has haunted the series ever since, in terms of the lack of lore behind it. I don't know, Bats, if you agree with me on that, because you're a bit more invested in it.
Yeah, I know, I agree with you. I mean, up until this point, all the enemies were based on sort of realistic concepts, and this was the first game where they just thought, let's just go out all Hollywood, and none of the enemies in the game really have any proper explanations behind them. I think in terms of the El Gigante, there's just a very vague mention in some of the Japanese books that they purposefully tried to experiment on a human plaga subject to make them like a giant, and that's literally it. That's basically nothing. But as you say, we get no kind of explanation in the game whatsoever, and that certainly didn't help. But I don't think Capcom cared by this point.
How did you get on with this, Rob?
The same thing with the knife. It's actually a lot easier for sure.
Is it?
Yeah, definitely. It's a lot faster. Not particularly too hard. I do agree it was definitely that point at which in the original game, at least the first time I ever played it, I was like, okay, so this is the path we're going down as far as design goes. But I guess by this point I had definitely gotten the idea that this was just a very different game. And I was enjoying the gameplay and loop and everything. So I was kind of intrigued as to where it was going to go from here anyway. So I think I'd gotten over it very quickly.
Stars?
Yeah, it went pretty well. I can't remember why. I usually go for the knife tactic, but for this time I just ended up using the sniper rifle. I actually don't know which does more damage, but it went fairly well, and it's fairly straightforward once the dog comes in, because he really does do a really good job of holding his attention, so you can just do whatever. But again, this was a part of the GameCube playthrough where I was finding like resource management really difficult. Yeah, it wasn't necessarily attacking the weak point. It was actually getting the weak point to appear, was just burning through my handgun and shotgun ammo. I had no grenades, I don't think. I think the only grenades I had were the ones that I could pick up, in the sheds. But even then, like, I was thinking, this is ridiculous. Like, I don't recall this being so tight on, resources, but got through it. But this was certainly one of the first points where I was starting to sort of question whether like the difficulty balancing or the adaptive difficulty was working as effectively as it does in later versions of the game. The adaptive difficulty whereby, like, if you start doing exceptionally well, the game tailors certain resources to you, or doesn't, to put, to sort of balance out the difficulty. I don't know how much of that was in place at this point, but it felt very harsh, I must say, in terms of resources.
Okay, so after that, we then head back to the church to go and rescue Ashley. And first puzzle, I believe, at this point, isn't it? Where we, chandeliers aside, we have to navigate that first kind of puzzle in the church.
We've had the gravestone one as well.
Oh yes, I tell a lie. You've had the gravestone one, but not much of a puzzle, I have to say. It was just flicking the lights to try and get it. What did everyone... I mean, this is a good opportunity to segue into Ashley generally. I suppose this lends itself to the storyline. I mean, it's a very much a damsel in distress type storyline, and over the years, original Ashley has generated a lot of memes with a kind of, help me, Leon, and her, I don't want to say uselessness, because I don't think it's fair. I think out of all the missions that you have in terms of, escorting her, I didn't ever find she was particularly cumbersome. And I think it added especially around the church when they all start coming at you and, they try and attack. I think it adds a new element to it in the fact that they're so determined to kind of capture her rather than going for you all the time. I found it quite useful, and there's only a few times in the game where she became a little bit annoying, and a lot of the times you can just dump her in a dump truck.
But that's the good thing, isn't it? There's plenty of opportunities where you get a reprieve from having to watch her all the time. I think if she just followed you around for the entire game and you were helpless to do anything about it, that would have become very frustrating very, very quickly.
Yes, I think that is quite well balanced, and and sometimes there's like the missions in the water room, isn't there, where it breaks up the gameplay a little bit, and you're given, I think, just a right amount of time with her before you might start thinking, oh, it's getting annoying, then she's gone.
I do actually think this has still probably got some of the best escort mechanics in any game. I think it's far better than the remakes. It feels very video gamey, but the way that she, like, there's two commands. You can either, get her to stand still, or she stays super tight behind you. She is actually locked to your back in a sense, but it makes it so much more frustrating than the really weird, like, tight or loose formation you have in the remake, where even if you have her set to, like, tight formation, she still, like, lags behind and doesn't keep up, and then it just, I can just find it so much more frustrating than just how seamless it is in the original. I think it's an absolutely fine game mechanic. I remember dreading it originally when you would read previews and, it would say that there are extensive sections where you have to escort Ashley through it. I'm thinking, fucking hell, I'm not going to have the patience for this. But to its credit, I think the game does it very well.
I think so, I agree.
Yeah, there's just a couple of sections in the castle the notorious water room, I think it does push it a little bit, but certainly no issues around the village area. I think it's actually quite good fun.
Leon, I have some bad news.
I'd rather not hear it.
Well, I'm afraid I have to tell you anyway. We've lost contact with the chopper. Someone must have shot it down, though we can't determine who.
Great.
We're prepping another chopper for you. Meanwhile, I want you to head towards the extraction point.
Got it.
And I think that is amplified well when you get to what is now a staple in the Resident Evil series, the cabin standoff. Good example here, you're in the cabin, she goes and hides, and so you don't need to worry about it. You've got something else to worry about with all the Ganados coming towards you. But again, wow, this held up so well. I got to this point and I was like, oh god, I'm not going to be very good at it, and I'm not that great with it. But I was impressed at how well everything still held together. And I think it's testament again to the remake doesn't really change it that much, other than adding the kind of goat head man.
Brute,
I said. Apart from that, it's very faithful up to the original, and it's testament that it's become, so many parts of this game just now become synonymous with the series, and this is certainly one of it. How did everyone get on with it, and how was it going back to what has become such a staple?
It's just as panic-inducing as ever, even though I've done it so many times. It never lets up. My tactic is to barricade 2 of the windows and leave 1 window free. So I will just shoot as many as I can through the free window, and then when the other windows start to cave in, I'll push the bookcase and block that window and concentrate on the others. And then as soon as Lewis says, let's go upstairs, I'll go upstairs and throw grenades down, and then I will just run from one side of the room to the other, knocking the ladders down, and really just let Lewis shoot the ones that come up the stairs. That's usually my tactic, and it's quite effective, to be fair.
That does sound good. More so than mine. Romby, what about you? How did you get on?
I did okay, but it was at this point where I was starting to go, oh yes, I remember what it's like to play on these sorts of controllers, and the responsiveness is, maybe it was also my PC's not completely up to stuff, so yeah, I was struggling a little bit, but it wasn't too bad overall.
I straight away moved the bookcase. I then went behind the kind of table area where Lewis was, so I had quite a good open view of the area, and then tried to take out as many as I could. It was becoming difficult, I won't lie, and I don't think I had lag per se, but the Wii was, I would say, struggling, but it was noticeable, should we say, that there was lots of enemies at this point. And I found my reactions were a little bit slow with the Wii, if you know what I mean, because it required quite a lot of quick reaction time to be able to shoot, move, get to the different point. And I think I wasted a lot of shotgun ammo in particular, just aimlessly shooting because it was getting tight and I was being funneled up the stairs without any grenades, and it was challenging, and I was almost running out of ammo at this point. I was down to a handgun shooting legs and just hoping and praying that the timer would run out more so than anything else. But I still think it's the best siege that they've done in, it's been replicated a few times. I still think this is the purest and most, as you say, Batman, panic-inducing out of all of them. Stars, what about you? What did you do? Any different tactics?
I would agree with you, just to start off by saying I still think this is the pinnacle of the cabin siege, mechanic as it's almost become, like you say. No, the only thing that I'm pretty much the same as John described. My only issue that I found was that I'd had an abundance, and almost it felt like ridiculously unbalanced amounts of head poppers. So I was just surrounded by parasites, and I had gone into the cabin siege with something like 4 or 5 flash grenades, and by the time I'd ended it, I had none left. It was ridiculous. There was just so many coming up the stairs, and I'm just like, well, Lewis, it's just stop popping their heads. Because at one point, I seemed to think I had about 4 or 5 in the room with me, and and the thing is, RE4, you do get, as much as the game is very generous with iframes for a lot of animations, you can get stun locked if there's those certain type of parasites, with the big swinging claw. If you just get surrounded by them, the amount of damage you take, you almost instantly killed from top health and just burning through flash grenades. I just, again, it's all to do with resource gathering and stuff. These encounters, I was going in with a reasonable amount of sort of built up ammunition and grenades, and literally finishing it with 6 handgun rounds remaining. Just thinking, this is, it's great because that's what you want from a Resident Evil experience. You want to feel like your resources are being depleted, but it's just the fact that I think going back to this version of the game was jarring when I've been playing the more modern versions in the sort of last 15 years. this is the first time I'd gone back to the GameCube version since 2005, because the moment the PS2 version came out, I always defaulted to that just because of like separate ways and the other content. So yeah, this is the first time I'd gone back to the GameCube since, well, in like essentially 20 years, and it threw me. It was continuing to throw me, and nothing more summed that up more than just how much I burned through everything I had in this Cabin Siege.
Well, it's good. It sounds like the experience I have with Remake 4. Just the kind of... Once you finished with that, I think Chapter 2 ends quite spectacularly. You've got a choice to make, ladies and gentlemen. You get to a different point of the village where you can choose to go Bella Sisters or the Gigantes. Before we get to Mendez, we'll stick with you, Sean. What did you do for this one?
The very first time I did it, back in 2005, I took the El Gigante route, but ever since then I've always done the Bella Sisters, and it was no different on this playthrough. I really dig this section.
Right.
I think with the fact that you can put Ashley in the bins,
yes,
get in the bin. I actually think the combat, I think the area, the sort of arena that you're fighting these Chainsaw Sisters in, I just think it's really good fun. I think if you want a single section of the game that really sums up like just how good it is as a gameplay loop, there is no better than this, because it's quite tense because there's two of them now, but it's also very satisfying in terms of it's got a lot of elevation. You can kick ladders down, you can do plenty of things to help, punch holes in the groups. And I just think if you had a single section that I think sums up how the original version of Resident Evil 4 plays, you've got the opening village siege and this section here. I'll always go Bella Sisters, and that's again no different on this playthrough. I loved it. Great fun.
Romby, what about you? Which route did you take?
I went with the Bella Sisters route as well. It is the better version, although I do tend to, once I get to the other side, go back and see what I can scavenge from going the El Gigante route later on, because you can go backwards through the path to pick up items and so forth. I think it's a much more enjoyable experience. I think it's more fun, as Sean's alluded to. It's kind of got this very good gameplay loop in it, and putting Ashley in the bins is easy enough, for generally speaking, to keep you free to fight. So yeah, it gets a bit tense in a few places that are pretty tight, but generally speaking, it's a better experience, I think.
I agree. I went Bella Sisters. I think I did the same thing as Sean. First time as El Gigante 20 years ago, and I don't think I've ever gone back to that way ever since. I do wonder if it's because you've only recently fought an El Gigante, and it kind of, I'm not saying outstays its welcome, but to fight one then two in such a very short period of time, so 3 in total, you're kind of going, it ruins their excitement, especially as like we did, there's 2 more coming up. I do like what they did in the remake, and just, remove the option, if you like, and you kind of have both. Even if El Gigante that part has now been removed to be like, it's like the castle battle, isn't it? But I like the Bella Sisters. The environment's quite good, using the landscapes, explosive barrels, and luring them around as much as you can. And again, like we mentioned with Ashley, the fact that you can get rid of her to an extent and not needing to worry about what's going to happen with her. I think the first time I played it, I was worried that she'd be found. So I kind of stood very close to where I put her in the dump truck, just in case, because I assumed that the AI had been so good that I assumed that she would have been found. But by the time I realised that she wouldn't be found and she was actually quite safe in there, it opened it up to a bit more options in terms of exploring and and different takedown methods. I tend to go for the Bella Sisters straight away and get rid of them. I know you can kind of use them for a bit of friendly fire with other Ganados, but for me, because they inflict so much damage just to get the key to get out of there, I just want to take them down as quickly as possible and try to hoard them into it, so they're both of them running at the same time, and then try and grenade them. And I was pleased I did this one first time. It is a worrying part when you get to this point. You're like, oh god. I was pleased I did it. Okay, Batman, what about you? Is it a 4 for 4 with Bella Sisters?
It's not, I'm afraid. I mean, I agree completely that the Bella Sisters is the better route, but I was just being lazy on this particular occasion and went down the El Gigante one because it's a lot quicker. I actually suffered my first death or retry here because El Gigante picked up Ashley and squeezed her to death. So I had to restart, and because I had an abundance of ammo and I was pissed off that my first death after all this time had been quite a cheap one, I unloaded on El Gigante, and after numerous playthroughs over 20 years, I actually killed him for the first time ever on this particular route. There's no real benefit to doing it because there's not much to explore in the area in terms of finding treasures or weapons or anything like that, but I just had the one death there. You save quite a lot of time going this route, and you emerge out on the cliff near the gondola down towards the power room. Sorry, the Chief Mendes fight.
Remind me, John, is it 2 El Gigantes straight away, or is it one then the other? Or do you have to move to a particular point to trigger the second? I can't remember. It's been such a long time.
There's only one. There's only one there.
Oh, there's only one? Oh, sorry. I thought I could have sworn there was 2.
No, there's 2 in the castle. There's just the one here, but it's quite tense because you've got to stop to shoot the chains off the doors and run through.
Yeah.
People usually use a little treat and shoot the chains off before he appears, but I forgot to do that. And as is always the way, you go to shoot the chains when he's right behind you and you've got no bullets left and you have to reload. And if you've not updated your guns enough, it takes half an hour to do that. And that's where he caught up with me and picked up Ashley and brutally killed her.
No dump trucks that way?
No, not that I could see. Because the game emphasises that you don't have to kill him, you just have to run through as quickly as possible. But I just decided for a change, because I've never done it before, to just turn around and kill him.
Well, there we go. Interesting. What then? We haven't talked about the gondola bit, but that's before this, isn't it?
No, it's after this. You get the gondola down to the Chief Mendes fight in the bar.
That was it. Yeah. And that's not really in the remake, is it? At least not in the main game. And what I remember a lot about that is you get the nice kind of little not say law room, not such a thing, but you get the kind of sacrificial room in the cave, which I always thought was quite a nice little hidden room to explore. I like being able to sniper a lot of the Ganados as you go down into the gorge, into the valley, and seeing them all fall to their peril was always rather amusing. Okay, let's talk Mendes then, because this is the boss of, I don't say chapter 1, but it's the village boss, isn't it? Let's be honest. This is the fight with the big cheese himself in his little cabin. Again, Ashley is out of action for this particular battle, which is helpful. And you're kind of locked in and trigger the boss fight. I found this interesting, I think. It's interesting in the sense that it's quite similar to the remake. And I hate going back to the remake. But I thought it was more difficult than the remake. I don't know if everyone else agrees with that. I found it a little bit more challenging.
I think it's a better fight in every way in the original. I really do. I think it's masterful. I was really taken aback by just how much more I preferred it to the remake battle. I think it's an absolutely amazing set piece in the original. Do you know what makes it for me? It doesn't have that really stupid bit at the end where he's just like throwing barrels and planks at you. It's a straight out slugfest. I think it's really, really good.
I like the fact that you kind of think you've won straight away from the cutscene. Where you blow up the thing, you're like, yeah, and then no, you're dealing with a different kettle of fish, and he's fast.
Isn't the mutation sequences so much better in the original? You see every sort of muscle pop and sinew, and the mutation is on screen to witness. Whereas in the remake, and all the RE Engine games are guilty of this, I don't know whether it's a limitation of the engine or something like that, but most mutations in RE Engine games generally happen off screen, whereas this was just so fantastic to see like a literal thing transformation, where his spine extends and all the things pop out. And I mean, again, 2005 tech, the GameCube really was cooking, to quote a modern phrase, wasn't it?
It looks gorgeous as well, with the barn on fire as well.
Yeah.
And back in 2005, everyone thought he was a tyrant.
Yeah, including me. You even get the claw popping, don't you? Moment.
Yeah.
Again, just have to say about like the sort of lack of realism in the original. The remake sort of cleverly integrates the barn fight as you're sort of on your way out of the village, but the barn in the original is just at this weird cul-de-sac that would have, it's just completely implausible. It is literally only designed this way in the original to be a boss fight arena. It makes no sense that this random barn would be like a gondola trip down a massive, twisty path, and then right at the bottom is just this weird barn. It's just it's so video gamey to a fault, RE4, the original, and isn't it great for it? It's so silly. And you get all this off-screen storytelling as well, don't you? Like, there's a rescue chopper coming, but then it gets blown up somehow. And it's just all told through these weird MGS-inspired codec sequences. It's just such a weird game.
Any problems with Mendes' fight? Any tactics?
I did die here on the second phase. I just was lazy. I thought it was far easier than I thought it was. But he just did so much damage in that second phase. I don't know whether you guys are the same, but sometimes you look at Leon's bar, his health bar, and you think, I don't really want to pop a heal yet. I think I've got enough left. And then he wanders you. It's, fucking hell, I should have healed. And that's how he caught me out.
I ran to the opposite side of the barn, climbed the ladder, and just sort of ran to one side of the walkway, and he comes stilting towards you, and then he makes like a growling sound, and that's when you know he's going to reach up and grab you. So as soon as you hear that sound, you run round to the other side of the walkway, pop him with a few shotgun rounds, and I just kept doing that. And then when he moved into his second mutation, I just jumped down and TMP'd him to death.
I despise the TMP in this.
But I don't think... Did you pick it up, Rob? Because I never do.
I thought it was everyone's default weapon, the TMP.
No, never
when you combine it with the stock and start to upgrade it and make it a bit faster, it's the perfect weapon.
Yeah,
That's
I
interesting.
agree with that.
Yeah, do you use it, Rob? Oh, right.
Yeah, I do. With the stock, it's a pretty solid weapon. It's pretty robust. It's good for rapidly taking out legs. So
maybe you're right, John, with adding stuff like the stock, but I just find it, it just goes through the ammo like nobody's business, and it just pitiful amounts of damage, and I'm like, oh.
Short bursts taking out legs.
I can see that.
You can knock people over and then run past them.
Short controlled bursts.
Yeah, short controlled, exactly.
How did you get on, Rob, with Mendez?
It's funny because I was thinking about this in regards to like the remake version as well, and just how different this fight is in some ways and not in others in the thematics of it. But not too bad. I'm going to say it's a bit ho-hum in both directions, which is a bit unfair, but it is what it is. I didn't struggle. It wasn't particularly... There's no real standouts. It's a very...
traditional fight, in that.
Traditional, mechanically simple fight for a Resident Evil game. Exactly. And I think that after everything else that's come up until this point, it feels a bit flat because of it. Not because it's actually a bad fight in of itself, but just because you've gone through so many other random, quite over-the-top fights. You're kind of like, oh, we're having one of these now? Like... Okay, I guess we'll just go back to the old mechanics style, kind of like just a very specific, very targeted fight. So, yeah.
I want to give a shout out to the end of this level where you've finally done Mendes, you've randomly picked up his false eye, which opens a door for some inexplicable reason. And then you think you're there, and then you get killed by a bloody truck. I'm like, no. I get more anxious by the horn in these games of these trucks than anything else, because the panic to shoot that bloody driver... Honestly, the first time, 20 years ago, it took 3 attempts after the fight of Mendes to get past the truck, to get to the castle. This time I was on it, and sniper rifle was very much at the equation, so I was kind of staggering forward, ready to go, and then I'm like, shit, bang, 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 and then done, and then I'm happy. But that noise gives me heart palpitations.
I would agree. I died here as well, because I can never remember if you have to shoot the driver or shoot the radiator and blow it up. And with this section in particular, it sort of lulls you into a false sense of security because there's like a little alcove on your right-hand side and you think, oh, if I run down there, I'll be safe. But that's where the truck crashes. And that was the mistake I made this time round.
That's good. I'm glad I'm not the only one. That finishes Chapter 2. We now move to Chapter 3, and hold on to your hats, ladies and gentlemen. We have made it to the castle.
Starting to wonder when you might notice us.
Who are you?
Me llamo Ramon Salazar, the 8th Castellan of this magnificent architecture. I have been honored with the prodigious power from the great Lord Sadler. I've been expecting you, my brethrens.
No thanks, bro.
My, we've got a feisty one. If you care for your own well-being, I suggest you surrender yourself and simply become our hostage. Or Mr. Scott, you can give us the girl because you're not worth a penny, I'm afraid. You can die.
I'm never turning into one of them. Never.
Got that right. We'll find a cure.
When I reloaded this game, I had an old saved game starting from Chapter 3-1, and I'd made it up to this point in normal mode. This was a couple of years ago when I think I was replayed a little bit of it for the retrospective podcast, and this is how far I got in normal mode, and I decided to pick it up from here as well, just to see how far I would get in normal mode, and Jesus Christ, it's so difficult for me in normal mode. It's like playing a completely different game. For someone who's not that attuned to action-orientated games, and I like to take my time, and again, with the Wii remote, whilst, yes, you can get very good aiming with it, I feel sometimes there's a little bit of lag with the Wii when you're kind of aiming. I don't know. I just think my controller's getting a bit old. I don't feel it's quite one-to-one as it should be, and I think you're punished quite a lot in normal mode with the Wii remote. I remember why I stopped here in normal mode and just found that the whole beginning of Chapter 3 with the catapults near impossible. I don't know why. Even when I got to this point and I was playing it again in easy mode, I think I died here 4 times just doing this little section, and it is without doubt my least favourite part of the game, the beginning of the castle. I like the introduction of the religious zealots. I think they are iconic with that kind of noise that they make, and the music, the atmosphere. You get the nice save room theme as well at the beginning, that kind of false calm before the storm, and then that castle theme is really kind of cool, and I think I hark back to what Resident Evil 3.5 potentially could have been. But then it just gets stupid, and then the whole game, I mean, we've already had boulders at this point, but this was like an unlimited supply of, on fire rocks being hurled at you by these religious zealots, and at this point I was kind of losing the will to live 20 years ago, going, the only thing that's keeping me playing now is the atmosphere, and I want to know what happens in the storyline, because I think I was exhausted 20 years ago. I just don't like this beginning part of the castle. I don't know if anyone else has any problems with it, or it's just me, but the number of times I was killed by getting the timings wrong with regards to that, thinking I'd shot out all the catapult holders and then not, it's frustration overload for this one.
Over the years, I've just got it quite well rehearsed now. So I plant Ashley next to the cannon, so she is raised with it, if you like. Even if she's grabbed, but at that point you've generally got enough time to run back to her before she's escorted out the level. And like you say, other than that, it's just taking it steady, sniping out either the barrels next to the catapults or the actual operator, and then once you've dispatched them, it's not too bad. But I mean, I agree, until I'd pretty much got that technique down, I remember being made utterly miserable by this section on the sort of early playthroughs back in 2005, because I just could not get it down. And if you can't get it down, you just have a rough time. You're just getting bombed and launched all over the place, and Ashley keeps getting grabbed, and like, this is the first time I think you feel probably any real frustration with the escort system, which is why I've always favoured just getting her out of the way, just putting her next to the cannon, so then as soon as you raise the cannon, she's there. And yeah, it's a rough introduction to the castle, and I think the remake also carried that on as well. I really struggle with this section in the remake. I can totally empathise with anybody who loses their temper with this section for sure.
The castle section 20 years ago was where I am, where you were, Nick, when you talked about chapter 1.2. Right. When we got to the castle, we met Salazar, and then I thought, oh, this is amazing. We've got this huge building to explore. It's just going to be like the RPD or the mansion. It's going to be backtracking. There's going to be locked doors. There's going to be optional areas, but it just wasn't like that at all.
No.
There is some very effective areas. I mean, it goes without saying that the remake is far superior in the castle sections of the game, but the certain areas of the castle in the OG still looks exquisitely good and still very effective. I thought the Navistador sections in the sewers were very good.
Mm-hmm.
The initial Garrador fight is good. The Hall of Water is just ridiculous. And it's really after you come out of the sewers and Ashley gets captured, or she falls into that ridiculously stupid trap, that it just starts to get all a bit silly. That bit where you're running round after the red cultist and that Gatling gun comes out of the floor. I mean, what the fuck? And that was something the remake thankfully fixed, because stuff like that, it's hard to suspend your disbelief. It's just utterly ridiculous. And, paintings sliding out of the way and cultists appearing with rocket launchers. It's just, that really did take you out of the experience and spoil the whole thing.
Ron B, what about you? How did you find the intro beginning bit, but also even the Garrador fight, because that's quite early on as well? I thought that was quite good, the Garrador.
I do like that version in the original more so than the remakes. I know this sounds really monotonous, but at this point I'm just kind of getting into the rhythms of what the game was, and it's kind of one of those things where once you find a groove in it, it kind of sits. I don't know if Sean was finding that with the GameCube version, but with item resource, but I just feel like it's one of those things once you kind of lock in with it, you can get through big chunks of it at a time, and it all just feels to flow. And I think at this point, once you're in the castle, it started to all kind of gel a little bit. I do find the whole castle thing a little bit disjointed, so coming into it, you're a little bit like, what's the setups and all that sort of stuff as well.
I found like some of the early bits with the Zealots just to be really tight, like when you're coming up some of the stairs near the beginning, and there's just so many of them there. They'll kind of run from upstairs and from downstairs as well, and you're trying to battle them, but then they keep grabbing Ashley. And it really, this point, bear in mind it comes straight after what I found to be a tedious opening to the castle section. It felt quite relentless, and the point where the mechanics of looking after Ashley were difficult. I think it improved with the Garrador fight, because I think what made the Garrador quite interesting was the fact that the build-up to him was quite interesting in that there's an obvious kind of like dungeon area, and I like the kind of cutscene onto him as you kind of zoom in on his eyes. You know, it's your clue, he can't see you, and again, it's very much in line with the Resident Evil 4 bosses in the sense that it's like very much a mechanic-led boss fight, in that you've got to try and, you know, add a little bit of stealth to it and, you know, sneak around, not try to make a noise, and, you know, try and use the environment to your advantage. And I thought that was a highlight. But yeah, John is absolutely right. The whole Gatling gun part is just, it is nonsense. And I don't know about you, but the Gatling gun, it took me 10 minutes to kill him. I could not kill him. And this was, again, goes back to my personal problems with the Wii Remote. I was just not quick enough to be able to run to a particular point. I'd taken out all the other creatures quite well, I thought. And it was just me and Gatling Gun Man left. And I just could not run to a particular point quick enough, press the Z button, aim it up, and then get the shot away before he turned around and faced me, and then shot. And then I kept losing health. I don't know, it must just be me, big as an old man, and slow reaction. I just couldn't get there quick enough, didn't have any flashbangs or anything like that to aid me in that particular point. I was purely reliant on speed and try and get to a point and then shoot him off balance, but he was well protected by his little guard thing, and again, I just found that frustrating. But on the plus side, the atmosphere remains quite consistent throughout the levels. The music is particularly enjoyable, and I actually preferred in the original going back to it, which surprised me, as John mentioned. There's a lot more Novistas, the bug things. There's a lot more of them, I find, in the original than there is in the remake. And whilst they are frustrating, that they're not particularly difficult to kill. And I was worried going back into the original that they would be cumbersome and annoying and, but I think they're actually handled very well in the game, leading up to the kind of nest scene and whatnot. And whilst I like what they did in the remake, I think they were quite good addition to the enemy list. That added a bit more, skill when, kind of looking for the invisibility type things and trying to shoot them that way. I enjoyed them, even if it did have some stupid scenes with all the swinging axes. I think that's later, but you know what I mean.
Tell you what does shit me up every single time I play this game, because I always forget about it, is when you first enter the sewer and you get this sort of sound effect of like a grate being kicked open and then something running at you really quickly, and then it just stops and you can't see anything. It gets me every single time, that.
I was pleasantly surprised at their usage in the original, because I'd forgotten how much they are used, or sensibly used. I preferred them to some of the other Zealots that we used. Any other comments from anyone?
I'm in agreement with everything that's said. I think the sewer section's masterful. The Gatling section's ridiculous. And I don't even think this is one area where I don't think the visuals actually still hold up. Certain aspects of the castle look beautiful, certain rooms, but there's also a lot of like repeated textures, a lot of quite dull corridors and stuff that you go down. I would say aesthetically, if you were to compare the two, this is where the game just loses some of that artistic flair that the village sections had. It's not a slouch as such, but it's no way near as interesting, and it's just too fucking long. As we're probably, no doubt going to cover.
I imagine this is where the HD project really comes into its own, though, the castle sections.
It doesn't bring it up as probably as much as you'd think, because it's just down to the fact that how sort of bland a lot of the locations are in terms of, so many corridors are just like a stone wall texture and a straight corridor. The notorious one is the one that there's like a corridor with the merchant tucked into like a little alcove. It's just basically like a long grey corridor. I mean, it just looks dreadful in every version because it's just literally a repeating wall texture. And you just think, who would make this? And this is the biggest problem with the castle in the original game. It's like, there is no thought to how that layout of the castle is put together. It makes no sense whatsoever. It is not a livable space. It's a video game level. That's what it is. And it's not a great one at that.
Yeah. One of the worst sections is you're in this like square room and you've got to run round one side to the other, and the painting retracts and there's two cultists with rocket launchers and you've got to raise that bridge in the middle.
Yeah.
You go through something like that and you think, what the fuck am I playing here? This is just so unrelated to what Resident Evil used to be. But then 5 minutes after that, you're going through the hedge maze section, which is really effective. And then you meet Ada, and she starts talking about Wesker, and then all of a sudden you're pulled right back in again.
The whiplash we have gone through in nearly 30 years as being Resident Evil fans, isn't it, is summarised in the castle in Resident Evil 4 quite effectively for that, what you've just said there.
Do you think that there's part of it that you kind of alluded to there, John, that instinctively you thought, right, I'm now in a big hub area? Because although the village is fairly linear, you do backtrack, don't you? You do go back to the other kind of village part, a degree of hubness, if you want to call it like that. And a castle seems like a natural progression from, a mansion RPD. And I think the remake did it a lot better. You can explore everywhere. And do you think there's part of it you instinctively thought, right, this is what's going to happen, and it didn't, and it felt far too linear?
Yeah, I thought it would be more akin to the RPD or the mansion. Yeah, the game would sort of still push you from A to B, but it would give you that illusion of optional exploring. Like, there wasn't really many optional rooms, there wasn't really many locked doors, the enemies were still relentless, the pace didn't slow down at all. If anything, it got worse and ridiculous to the point where, you'd clear a room of enemies and then a load more would just fall out from a random hole in the ceiling. Because it was so relentless and it felt so arcadey and video gamey, you couldn't really get absorbed in the atmosphere the game was trying to create. And as you said, the remake was much more effective in that sense.
It's a shame, really, because it has some hallmarks of what the hub area would be like, i.e. you're trying to find 3 ornaments, aren't you, to try and progress onwards where after Ashley's been captured. And it could have been, and as a remake kind of did it a lot better. You can kind of choose where you want to go. But yes, you're right, it does feel far too linear, and something, sadly, Resident Evil 5, I think, very much doubled down on. Okay, let's talk the water room then, whilst we are in this part of Chapter 3. Quite a famous room in Resident Evil lore, just because of its trickiness. Any problems from anyone this time? Specifically towards the end, I suppose, with the snipering.
It's not too bad on normal mode. Last time I played this was in the build-up to Remake 4 coming out. It's the one and only time I went through it on professional. And normal mode is so much easier. Obviously, there's not as many cultists. There's not as many crossbow snipers on the second floor either. I mean, I must admit I was dreading this point, but I had such a lot of ammo and I didn't find it too bad. If you've took the time to upgrade your sniper rifle enough to the point where the bullets can pierce through the shields.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
It was okay. I think I was just taken aback because I expected there to be a lot more enemies than there was in this section. And the Ashley sniping scene, again, it's really effective. The music is superb, and there's that sense of panic when you've got enemies coming at you at the floor and they're closing in on Ashley. And I've always enjoyed that particular section. I just can't understand for the life of me why Leon can't wade through knee-deep water just to get to the door on the other side.
Robbie, what about you?
Yes, the water room stuff's just sluggish. It was never one of my highlights. It's been such a talking point, but I think that's inherently where I was going with my comments before about this whole thing. It's all supposed to blend to a bunch of rooms because they're all mechanically based. You're just shooting a bunch of enemies. Inherently, it's the very gamey part of this video game, and I didn't struggle, but it wasn't fun, if that's an easy way to put it.
I'd agree entirely. You can always see like the 10 points sign coming off. Because it's almost like a shooting gallery, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You rescued the girl. Congratulations, through to the next round. We're having these themed rooms, water room, lava room, it kind of just felt like they were just making this hodgepodge. I do love the little cart rooms. I think they're really great. One of the things we haven't talked about that's come up that I really started to focus on at this point on my gameplay was the shooting gallery as well.
Right, yeah.
That's come up and I kind of went and had a play with that again. So, which again probably lies to the fact that it feels like that shooting gallery element has come into the game a little bit. So I'm kind of like, it's time to have a mess around with that. Yeah, I think it's probably one of the weaker parts of the entire experience. And at this point as well, in the pacing of the original game, which is definitely a longer game, it starts to feel like a bit of a slog at points.
Yeah, I'd agree, yeah. Stars, what about you with regards to Water Room as we head out towards kind of Ada section? How did you find it?
I think I had one death, and it was, I think Ashley got killed because I always get her to operate the cranks.
Yes.
And try and cover her as much as I can, but I seem to think there was just one flail-wielding cultist got a lucky hit on her, and I hadn't given her any yellow upgrades or anything like that, so it was just a default health. And I think she died extremely quickly. The sniping section in the following area was fine. Did that straight away. Historically, I've done what some people in the fandom have effectively called the real survival mode for Resident Evil 4, which is where you go through the game not using the merchant at all. You have to just basically only use the weapons you can collect in the game. It's a great way of playing the original version of Resident Evil 4, and I do recommend people do it. But the downside is you don't have a sniper rifle at this point. So I just mainly use the pistol here and just like kneecap the cultists.
Oh.
And Ashley can generally get by pretty fine there. No real issues here. And at this point, I felt like the resource management I was starting to get a bit on top of as well. I didn't find the castle too taxing, in all honesty. It was not bad.
The good news for me was, because I was in easy mode, I didn't go into the garden. It's locked off the first time anyway. You go back there later.
Nicholas, you've done yourself. I forgot the easy mode in the original actually cuts out some areas, doesn't it?
Oh,
Nicholas, come on.
It saved me many, many times. So I didn't see any. Yes.
The hedge maze is one of the best sections in the game.
Yeah, but the game said no. It said no, you're right. You don't need to go down there.
I can't subscribe to this, ladies and gentlemen. This is ridiculous. I'm out. Cheers. Bye. It's goodbye from me, Stars Tyrant.
That leads on to the Ashley playing section, which I don't think any of us were playing the Japanese version, because in the Japanese version you can actually play with pre-rendered backgrounds, can't you? And do it in traditional
pre-rendered backgrounds, camera angles.
Camera angles, sorry, apologies, yes. With the camera angles, yeah. How did everyone find the Ashley playing section? Bear in mind, I had found the playable section in Remake 4 to be a highlight of the game. Again, my memories of this is a shit part of the game. I found it actually quite enjoyable. I thought it was quite challenging because she is quite weak. There's tactics involved in terms of picking up, trying to throw things and, skulk around with all the cranks and whatnot and do that. I thought it was quite decent, and I had a very pleasant experience, or surprising experience, because I thought it was awful. Any problems for anyone? Anyone feel the wrath of the what they're called? The
Armadaras.
Armadaras. Thank you.
Well, it's quite an easy section, as you say, but it's very, very effective because it's panic-inducing when you're in the dark and you can hear them stomping towards you. It's a short and sweet section. I think the Ashley section in the remake is superior, but there's certainly nothing wrong with this. I thought it was very, very enjoyable.
I had Ashley's alternative costume, so it was more enjoyable.
Pervert.
I've always found the poised armours, ready for the QTEs, quite creepy. How they're just stood in the ready position.
Yeah.
They look quite intimidating in the, in the torchlight. I think that's always been a really effective scare when you turn a corner and there's just this living armour with an axe raised. It's always kind of good. How did you get on with the puzzle? Because I used the method that the fandom have been sharing on socials for the last couple of years.
What's that version?
Can't remember which block it is exactly, but you move one block and then you just literally do all the outer ones in like a clockwork formation, and it just completes itself in like 8 moves. It's super easy. You just, like I say, you just move one block out and the rest of it just literally just follows round in like clockwise formation.
Oh, yeah, I'm looking at this on the wiki, yes. Oh my gosh. Oh my god!
It's ridiculous, isn't it? I never realised it was that simple.
It's one from the centre out, and then oh my gosh, yeah, and it just goes round from the 9 o'clock position, and then clock. Wow. Well, there you go. I didn't struggle with it. I felt this is probably, I'll say, the best puzzle, the most traditional RE puzzle in the game. Rob, how did you get on with this part of the game?
It was alright. I didn't like it as much as most of the rest of you, but I haven't disliked it either. It's just one of those sections where I'm a little bit like, it kind of made sense to have it in the game. And yeah, hearing this about the slide puzzle, I was about to comment on that before Sean brought this up, but I didn't know about that either, so I've always disliked that puzzle. But I've always liked the enemy types, and I think the general flow of it's fine. It's such a weird, well, it's not a weird thing to have, but it's just that this time after what you've had with all these sections, all of a sudden it's like a bit slamming on the brakes, but I guess it also kind of makes sense. It is a bit of a change of pace. If anything, I feel like maybe it could have happened a bit more often. You've had Ashley with you for so much of the game at that point, essentially, that there could have been some other bits where she helps out a bit more than she does, and I think that's something that I think they tried to balance a little bit more in the remake, although it still didn't do a huge amount with it.
There's no end boss to Chapter 3, so to speak. We move on to Chapter 4, and at this point you feel that the castle is slightly outstaying its welcome. I don't know, it's getting to that point, isn't it? The rest of the castle, so you've got a few things to get back. Firstly, who went and got back the Magnum, the broken butterfly? Because now with Ashley in tow, rescued and safe, you could go back to that particular point and give that hoist up into that room.
Yeah, I always do. Again, I think this is a habit from the real survival, I say in inverted commas mode. This is the only other supplemental weapon you get from the shotgun in that particular playthrough, so it's always been fairly essential to go and get it. This is one of the only moments where it does kind of feel like a classic Resident Evil experience, because most of the castle at this point is fully unlocked. You can pretty much go anywhere and just get the optional, although I don't think there's many in this, there's more in the remake, but it's basically your last little jaunt around the castle just to finish up any loose ends, and it's the only time it feels generally open as such.
Yes. This is the point, though, where you've got the stupid lava scenes.
Well, this is probably the worst section of the game, Chapter 4. In all honesty, the game could lose all of Chapter 4 near enough apart from the Salazar fight, and the game would have probably been better for it. I don't think it would have had anywhere near as much combat fatigue and stuff like that.
Again, I'd recommend easy mode because you can completely avoid getting the King's Grail, which is the Leon fight with the Armadoras. So that's
serious.
Yeah, you don't do that. No, game goes, no, you're right, mate. You're right. Just go and get the Queen's Grail and you're sorted. King's Grail,
We're going to have to postpone the release of this podcast, Nick, so you can actually play through it properly this time.
No, we don't worry. We don't worry about King's Grail.
Must say, that corridor leading up to the Kings and Queen's Grail with the glowing curtains, still absolutely timeless.
I think that was the poster boy of GameCube graphics.
Yeah. Just a brief aside then, before we carry on. You know, with the benefit of hindsight, and obviously the remakes come out and it's recontextualized a lot of the characters and stuff like that. How did you honestly take the script and the writing and the interaction between the characters? Because I've got to say it really stood out as being absolutely awful this time. I don't know whether it is that benefit of the remake recontextualizing the characters, and as much as I appreciate like Salazar is more of a character in this than he is in the remake, I mean the writing is atrocious. It's so bad. It doesn't even have that early RE charm to it, because by now the production values are so much more dazzling that you expect so much more. And I just thought, even with the tongue firmly placed in the cheek, this was just dreadful. I was literally flabbergasted at how bad some of the writing was. I don't even see it as humorous or meme-worthy or anything like that. It's just plain bad, I think.
Yeah, I would agree, but it has its charms because I think the voice actors are all really good in this. I think Paul Mercier is a good Leon. I think the guy who plays Osmond Sadler is really good. And the guy who plays Salazar is just having fun with how ridiculous it all is. Krauser as well. I think Krauser's much more effective in this version. But yeah, in terms of the actual script, like you say, it's dog shit. I mean, Shinji Mikami clearly didn't give a fuck about the writing in this game. I think he's since admitted that, hasn't he?
Yeah, he wrote it in like 2 weeks, didn't he?
And it shows.
Your hand comes off.
Please spare me.
The thing is that I slightly disagree, Sean. With you over that.
Nick.
I don't have a lot of love for this game, and I often said in our reviews of the remake, I prefer the remake in absolutely every way. Yeah. And yet, I found myself playing this with such a smile on my face when we got the cutscenes. I just found them so ridiculously over the top, Salazar especially, and I think when I was playing the bit where the right hand comes off, that moment, he shoots the knife into it, I think my wife was walking, I was like, what's this bit? And there's something so cheesy about it that I think does resonate with the original.
I don't necessarily mind the actual cutscenes, because I think the physicality adds a layer of, sort of flamboyance and enjoyment to them, but it's the codec sequences, I think. They're just worthless.
Wisely removed in the remake.
Yeah, but I suppose that came at the expense of the fact that then Salazar and Sadler aren't fleshed out as much because they don't have anywhere near the level of dialogue they do in the original because of these codec scenes. Yeah. So it's a real cruel irony that in sort of removing them and making the game better, you don't get a sense of their character anywhere near as much. They're much more of a non-entity in the remake, I find, Sadler and Salazar.
Because we don't even meet Sadler until, one of the very last chapters in the remake.
Yeah. Whereas in the original, he's at the church, isn't he, I think?
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird. I wonder if that was a late addition, just to put him in the story earlier. because it is just so random that he's just there, and then for the rest of the game he's on the island.
My view on the scripts and that is that the game is so ridiculous. It kind of starts off relatively grounded, and then by the time you get to El Gigante, as we've kind of discussed already with our playthroughs, we're kind of eye-rolling at the castle bit. It just suits the narrative so well. It's almost like Leon knows he's in a video game.
I can play through the entirety of Resident Evil Survivor, and the voice acting in that doesn't bother me because it's all part of that experience, you know. But I don't know. There's something about the OG going back.
You're elevating it because it's, as you said, such a high production game, which it is. You're expecting more, whereas I think I'm just kind of going along with it, going, this is so
I feel like
bloody
a game
ridiculous.
later, they gave me everything that I wanted, because like dramatically the cutscenes and stuff in RE5 are phenomenal.
Yes.
And, you know, it obviously has the RE4 gameplay to back that up.
But then 5 loses so much charm as a result. There is an inherent charm about the stupidity of 4 that, as I said, I wasn't quite expecting going back because I've been so enamoured, if you like, with Remake 4. And
You're its biggest defender tonight.
No, we'd spoken on the Remake 4 podcast, hadn't we, about, we missed some of those funny interactions. You kind of get a little bit with Salazar later on in the boss fight, don't you? And some of the funny quips.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I found myself more amused than I thought I was going to be, put it that way. Right. Ashley's captured again by the Nova Star, because of course she is.
Did you destroy the nest?
I did, yes, I thought I would. I think it's the first time I did. I had so many cat's eyes at the end. I was filling those gold statues faster than you can shake a lamp at. What comes next? You got the 2 Garrador fight, which famously I struggled so much on in the remake. This one I didn't mind as much, and you can use the bells, can't you, for that? Any problems with this?
I had a few deaths, yeah.
Did you?
I really struggled. I know it's really hard in the remake, but every time I shot the bell, they just seemed to ignore it, and they just seemed to know where I was all the time.
That's a good question, though. What's the best weapon to use to shoot the bells?
Well, I just used the sniper rifle from a distance. You don't really have any silenced weapons in this game, whereas in the remake, you can.
But I just used a pistol. It's usually enough to draw their attention, but I did find they were on me a lot. Like, I couldn't really get them off me at one point.
They took a lot of ammo as well.
Yeah.
Compared to the first Garrador, I was absolutely pommeling. I was using up all my Magnum on this one, thinking, this will be sorted. And again, aiming for me was a problem, but I was getting some good shots on its back, and it's like it took so many shots.
It's not a pleasant section, and I'm pleased that the remake doubled down and it made it even worse. And what follows this immediately?
You have the cutscene with Salazar.
So maybe you have 9 lives, but it doesn't matter now, Mr. Kennedy. I've sent my right hand to dispose of you.
Your right hand comes off?
Say whatever you please. Die, you worm!
Yeah, okay. You get to the throne room, don't you? That's it.
Yeah, and you're looking at then going to do Vertigo. So let's talk about that, which I think is probably still the best boss fight in the entire game. I think it's a very well balanced but very challenging boss fight. I liked, because I don't think it happens in the remake, you get quick time events, but from its tail coming from up the ground. I don't think that happens in the remake. I think it's only from the top. I could be wrong, but even on easy mode, this took 4 attempts for me. It was absolutely brutal. I used up all my ammo to a point where I really had to strategize each time as to what I was going to do, where I was going to go, how I was going to do it, and the route I was going to take in terms of activating the nitrogen canisters. Whilst I found this more forgiving in some ways than the remake, whereas I think Vertigo's AI in the remake is even more clever. This one seems to be a little bit more liberal in walking into the nitrogen tanks, but even then, I was amazed at how little damage it did, but I was cocky at the beginning. I was like, haha, yes, you keep walking, bam, bam. And even after I got all of them, it still wasn't dead. I was like, it. And the quick time events were brutal for me a lot of the time. It would hit me a lot, and I'd get stun locked in the corner in one of the generator rooms. I was in the corner, and I just couldn't get out. But go on, Bats. How did you find it?
Well, similar to yourself. I mean, I normally don't kill him, but this time I decided to kill him, and he was still alive after I'd used all the gas canisters. And I was trying to remember where his weak point was, because when he's in his normal state and you shoot him, the bullets just seem to bounce off that sort of carapace armour he's got. I can't even remember where his weak point was, so I think I just hit him more out of luck than design, to be honest. But the best way to do it is to just use the gas canisters on him and don't shoot him. Just let him struggle along while he's frozen, because that wastes more time. If you shoot him, fair enough, he caused damage, but then he breaks free of the freezing quicker. So if you just let him get frozen and let him wander around, that wastes much more time, and by the time you've used all 4 canisters, the lift's arrived.
I even knew you could wait for the lift. I thought you always had to kill it.
No, I would say in 20 years of playing this game, I've only killed him twice.
That is extraordinary. I never knew that.
I thought this was a Birkin situation. It's like the lift's coming, but it's not really coming until you've killed him.
I don't blame you for thinking that, because it does take a long time.
Wow. Stars, what about you? What did you do? You presumably killed him.
I killed him instantly.
Oh.
Because I can't believe this hasn't come up. Who of us, raise hands, snagged the rocket launcher?
No.
Yeah.
No space.
I always save it for Salazar, though, every single time.
Yeah, oh, interesting. I always save it for Dugo, yeah. So, froze an instant rocket launcher, head straight to the lift, done.
Oh, that's not a bad tactic.
I hate this fight in the original. I just find it wastes every resource.
It does.
It's such a bullet spongy boss. In a game where I would generally defend it from having bullet spongy bosses, I always found that this one just used to just burn through your ammo.
But I liked the fact that it did to an extent. I don't like bullet sponges. I'm famously not, but I just felt this was a tactically astute boss, should we say. You know, there are things you could do. You could vary your gameplay and tactics to maximise your time. I'm really interested in what John said, not just about the timing, but just letting him freeze and then perhaps, you know, get some time to regain ground if he's just going to sit there. That's interesting. Rob, how did you approach Vertigo?
I took it out. I knew that you can do both. It does take a very long time for the lift to arrive. It's always been easier for me to whittle it down and fight it. Usually I've got enough resources to do so. It can chew up a lot of ammo, as you both alluded to. But it's just a game of patience, essentially, with the canisters and slowly whittling it down and QTEs in between. So, yeah, nothing too extravagant, nothing too bad.
What was your choice of weapon, then? I favoured the shotgun.
I didn't use the RPG, although I did pick that up earlier. There is an easy way to freeze it and fire a rocket at it, that's for sure. I tend to use the shotgun and the TMP sometimes to knock it back. If it's running at you, it tends to stop it in its tracks a little bit. And then just like TMP or pistol to blow up canisters, and yeah, pretty straightforward.
That then leads on, after that, we're now into even more concerning parts of the game.
Well, you pass through the mines, which is quite a nice little section. I mean, it was interesting to see them actually drill in for the plagas, and you saw them all fossilised in the rocks, and there was another chainsaw fight.
Yes, there was, yes. But again, what were you thinking, John, though? The first time, why am I suddenly in an Indiana Jones movie?
Well, I was more concerned as to why one of the BOWs was wearing bondage gear, to be honest. The second El Gigantes, I don't think this has ever happened to me before, but when both of them come walking in and you open the door and one of them falls into the lava, I know it's impossible to get them both at the same time, but I was running away from the other one, and the one that was in the lava actually reached out with his hand and grabbed me and pulled me in. Instant death. I didn't know they could do that. I'm sure that's never happened to me before.
I got caught out by that back in there.
Yes, he can. I really struggled with this particular boss fight because I don't know if I was getting confused, but yeah, I took out the first one, but it took me ages to work out what I had to do. I think I was getting muddled with the remake, and I saw the zip line, and I was getting it all wrong. And because ideally you wanted the bondage gigante, if you want to call it that, to be the. I think he's stronger than the other one. And I just couldn't for the life of me get it right. And I was losing a lot of ammo and health because I was trying to get one out of the way. And I think I was trying to line up the bondage one, but he was far, far too quick for me. And so I was kind of running around in a circle, going up the ladder, zip lining down. And it got to a point where I killed the other one. I think I killed both of them in one go, but I don't think I ever got the lava death for them. I think I killed both of them in kind of hand-to-hand combat, as opposed to using the lava. Because I think when I tried to do it, it locked and it wouldn't go in. Once you've used it once, it was done.
It is timed. you just have to wait a couple of minutes.
Okay.
You do get another go, yeah.
Oh, I did it the hard way then. I was getting very frustrated. There's this really stupid animation that they do. If they're not quite on it, they kind of do this weird side moonwalk shuffle to get out of the way. They go, oh, no. And you're like, okay, fine, clever. Yeah, I found Bondage Gigante quite a challenge, actually. And he took an awful lot of ammo for me to shoot him down. And again, I think I was snipering, and I should have followed John's advice of doing the knife. I think I got a couple of knife things in, but I'm so reluctant to use it. I don't think I equate knife power to be particularly strong. But John's saying it is quite a good slicing technique. But yeah, it took a couple of attempts, actually, that one for me. Can you get any of them in, or is it always just one into the lava?
I think it's
you
just
can only
one.
And then
You
it stays sealed.
Yeah, you can do as Sean was alluding to. If you miss it, it does reset. But yeah, once one's in, that's it. This is also the famous speedrunner's spot for skipping with the Ditman glitch, which allows you to skip the El Gigante through the wall by zip-lining down the zip line and skipping your way through, which is quite famous. Yeah, you can skip through a big chunk of the mines. There's another bit that you can do as well in the mine cart section as well, but yeah, that's a pretty famous glitch.
I exploited a different glitch as well, because if you you get like a bundle of gold off each El Gigante if you kill it, but if you lose one into the lava, obviously you forego getting that gold. But in the original GameCube version, if you go back into the room after you've defeated both of them, you've moved on, if you go back in, the gold from the Gigante that fell into the lava is just sat in the middle of the room so you can pick it up. So kind of cheated. Kind of cheated the game. Exploited a glitch.
Any other problems with this before we move on to the kind of lion sacrifice stone thing?
It's a nice area graphically. When you go back outside into the ruins and you get that letter from Ada and you see all the villagers stood around that bonfire, it's quite atmospheric.
But where are you at this point?
Well, I don't know, because the castle just goes on. You start riding the blooming gondolas and you see all these different towers stretching off into the darkness, and it's like, well, that's not what the castle looked like when I first went into it.
Yeah, because you feel you've travelled a long way on the carts.
Yeah.
I liked the kind of sand ruins, and that's your kind of introduction to the Klaga and the kind of wild ones that are kind of running around, and the permanent sand that's kind of falling down. Only one chainsaw for me. How did everyone get on with the carts section? Again, I thought it was a little bit too long compared to the remake. I think the remake did it a little bit better.
It's easy enough if you use the TMP and just mow down all the enemies before they have a chance to jump into the minecart with you.
Yeah, I always stayed at the back one. I don't know if anyone else did that tactic, so I always ran to the back carriage.
Yeah.
So I knew nothing would get behind me, and then kind of did it from that way.
I mean, it's pretty easy, and it's just a question of whether you get caught out with the quick time at the end.
Yes.
Where you have to jump across the chasm.
Any issues, Rob? Sean?
No, I always manage to. I use a pistol on this section generally, and as you're coming up sort of each, I suppose you would call it minecart station. If you wing enough of them on the legs, they just fall into the tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you just mitigate them coming into the car at all. And then when Salvador jumps in, you just shotgun him till he dies.
Yeah. Yep. That's exactly what I was about to say. Same tactic, and just QTEs with the boards if you don't smash them.
It's amazing how the remake has skewed my perception of it, because I was expecting this sequence to be a lot longer than it actually was. Because I think, like John said earlier, this was the first time I'd played the original since the remake had come out. And your memory of certain events gets irreversibly changed until you replay it again. And I was just thinking, fucking hell, I'm coming down the final spiral already, where you've got the QTE jump at the end. And it's incredible how we know the difference between each game, but your brain kind of blends them occasionally.
Yeah.
And I know the difference between the two, but every now and then I go, this is so much shorter than I thought it was, and I'm aware that that's the remake affecting my perception of it. So it's interesting. Like I said at the beginning, this is the first time we've done a retrospective with the remake already in play, and it's amazing how much it's impossible to not compare the two. Whereas this is something we've never really had to contend with before.
It made me appreciate what the remake did with Luis, really, and expanded him as a character, because he's already long dead by this point in the original, and he's not really in the game much at all in the OG.
Oh, he's just there to help you out at the beginning, ain't he, really? Nothing major. Chapter 4 ends with another set piece, which I despise. I'm not necessarily talking about old bloody Robo Salazar, because that's stupid, but more so the tower part, ladies and gentlemen. That whole set piece drives me up the wall.
The weight-controlled lift.
Oh, don't. It is so difficult with the Wii remote because they are in your face and you get stun locked and you end up just kind of blasting and just hoping for the best that you're going to hit anything. You just don't have time to be able to even calibrate your thoughts. And this is the point I really missed the kind of quick control for weapon select. So like the D-pad in RE Engine being able to, be able to select the different weapons, and I found this annoying that I had to go through back into the inventory, choose equip and that kind of stuff. This was the point where I wished it was quicker because it needed to be quicker because so much is going on. And this took 3 attempts to get this right because I was hemorrhaging ammunition and the cultists were just relentless. I cannot offer any tactics other than hit and hope, which is really bad, so I apologise, ladies and gentlemen. Batman, what about you?
Yeah, I don't like this section at all. I just think it's complete nonsense. I just tend to take out as many of the snipers as I could with the sniper rifle before I got on the lift. And then it just seemed to be an endless amount of red cultists just dropping down. And I got to the point where I was, probably for the first time in the game, where I was very, very low on ammo. It far outstayed its welcome, this section. It just went on for far too long.
Yeah. Romby, what about you? Patience waning at this point.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. It's the slog. And I remember, it's funny thinking about this because I remember the first time I ever played this at this point in 2005. I just remember going, geez, how long is this game? It's just, you're doling out what little bits of plot elements were coming through. The castle had been such a slog of, like, not a lot happening. A lot of samey gameplay of just being, like, trapped in a room, figure out how to fight your way out. Occasional brief changes and things like the mine carts and so forth, but like generally speaking, you're just like one area to a battle to another battle. It's kind of funny thinking back about it in regards to what you were saying early on in the podcast in regards to that, like the gameplay loop and stuff of realizing that this is what this game is going to be. And I think it didn't really dawn on me until about this far in that we were just like, okay, like I don't mind this gameplay loop, but it's starting to like where we need some more variety or some stuff needs to happen, or we need a very much a change of scenery. And clearly it's one of those things I think they took on board for the remake to kind of try and change the layout and pacing of that quite a bit and reshuffled this whole section quite a bit compared to the other parts of the game for that exact reason. So again, like Sean said, it's kind of those things you realize, and more in hindsight, I guess, putting the 2 and 2 together, going back and playing it. Yeah, it's just like a lot of fighting towers, bridges, enemies, lifts. It all starts to blend together as a very samey experience.
I'd forgotten with the Salazar statue. I just assumed it started straight away, and I've forgotten you've got a whole bloody, almost like a puzzle section. You've got to keep jumping across his bloody arm and a hand moving up and down, using it as a lift. So I'm just so ready for you to come alive, and I can crack on with the next bit. But yeah, talking of Salazar, the boss fight. No one-hit KO here with the golden egg or whatever you can do in the remake. This, I found a very tricky boss fight as well, and I was very close to giving up because I had 0 ammo by the time I ended this, and I was struggling enormously. Again, the aiming, I just found difficult. I shouldn't have done the Wii version, I really shouldn't have done, but what I found annoying with this one was more to do with the QTEs, more so than anything else. I was getting really annoyed with the QTEs of the stamp, which I could avoid, but then when I was avoiding the slam down, I was then suddenly getting a one-hit KO from it, and that annoyed me, so I thought, okay, don't get too close, because I wasn't getting too close, and I couldn't really get a good shot of him. And then I discovered there's a whole second level, which I'd never noticed before, where you jump down, so that was a new experience for me. I thought, oh, what's this area? But that didn't particularly help because you couldn't really see it. So I found myself wasting a lot of ammo just shooting the claw, or whatever it was, his appendage, and hoping for the best, and then waiting for his mouth thing to open up. But again, a bit like the kind of remake, it took a few attempts because of these one-hit KOs, and I struggled to work out what was the safe distance for the one-hit KO and what wasn't. I felt it was a little bit cheap in that sense, but I don't know. That was me. Rob, what did you find with Salazar?
It's just one of those ones where you just kind of have to, I know it sounds weird, but kind of strafe around and just try and avoid the attacks and deal with the QTE with the arms slamming down if you get the timing right. It's not a great fight, but it's not a bad fight, and it's kind of funny, we're going back to talking about like somewhat traditional. It's a bit of a traditional boss fight where the boss kind of sat in a position and, its scale is big, but realistically it's not a particularly complex fight in a lot of ways.
a bit like Plant 42, I suppose. In a
yeah, it is. It's a bit like the remake version too, with the two levels. Like, it's not a particularly taxing one, but if it goes wrong, it goes wrong. I think is probably an easy way to describe it. And it sounds like that might have happened with you fighting the controls of it.
Yeah.
I think the muscle memory came back. It's been a long time since I played this, but it kind of wasn't too bad in the scheme of things. But yeah, not particularly a great fight. It's funny though, I'm thinking about it in regards to the remake. Like, I'm not a particular fan of the remake's version of the fight either, they've gone the opposite end of the direction where he's jumping around like a rabbit all over the walls. I feel like neither are particularly great fights. And inherently, I wonder if the thing they did in the remake with that egg was to kind of be because when they were doing the testing for it, they were like, yeah, we need to have this fight in here, but it's not great. And the original wasn't great either. And so they kind of went with an Easter egg, no pun intended, to kind of hide a way to get out of it quickly, knowing that in both versions it wasn't particularly great, but you kind of couldn't not have it. I do like his design. I do like the monster itself. And I like the idea of having this placement up on the top of this very tall tower, but other than that, it's not particularly great.
It's supposed to be the Queen Plaga there, which again, I think that was removed really from the remake. John, is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you don't see it. I mean, there's hints it might be underneath Salazar because that's where he falls when Leon shoots him, and he comes up. You just don't really see it.
And it merges with his right hand. Both of them are absorbed. How did you get on, John?
Rocket launcher to the face. I've always despised this boss fight. I can never be arsed with it. So yeah, I always get the rocket launcher from Chapter 3 and save it for this boss fight every single time.
Sensible. Stars, you couldn't have done this. You must have battled.
I feel like I'm the odd one out. I love this boss fight. I think this is so much better than the remake. It's kind of stunted as a boss fight because it's just basically a jaw on a wall. But I think as a set piece, it's wonderful. And I think it's so much better than the remake's floating testicle Salazar. The remake fight is nonsense. This feels like, a moment. I really enjoy it. Again, I've got the technique down to a T over, 20 years of rehearsal. So it doesn't really give me any problems, but I've always appreciated the visuals of it. I think it, aesthetically looks great. I think the mutations sort of, the way it pops and sinew, it's all really kind of good. And, it's got like classic body horror that we appreciate in this series. I love this. I was kind of surprised at how negative the attitude has been toward it. But this is why we bring such a diverse approach to the podcast, isn't it?
Inherently, this is the thing. I think from a design standpoint, as I said, I really like it. But I think from a gameplay standpoint, I found it very woefully lacking. But I can also see why someone might also enjoy it too, because it's a bit of a change of pace. And I definitely agree that I prefer it over the remake's version.
I don't know what they were doing with the remake. I just think it's so strange that he's just this floating ball that has these little tendrils that allow him to spider swing across the room or whatever it is. It's so strange.
I do remember 20 years ago when obviously this came out. Was this the first time when people started to question whether there was any relationship between the Plaga and perhaps the T or G virus? Because this is where you kind of got the famous eyeball emerge.
I never considered it personally, no.
It was an interesting addition, and of course Sadler has a lot of eyeballs as well. That finishes Chapter 4. We now move on to the utter tedium that is Chapter 5, The Island.
I hate to break it out to you, but Salazar's dead.
Yes, it seems that way.
Sadler, why don't you give up and let Ashley go home?
Perhaps you are disillusioned with overconfidence, just because you killed my small-time subordinate.
Sadler, you're small-time.
Oh. Writhe in my cage of torment, my friend.
How dare you, Nick?
I don't like the island at all. But I will say, after Chapter 4, you're kind of like, thank Christ the castle's over, because that did outstay its welcome. Generally speaking, on replaying this game, for the podcast, I didn't feel the island outstayed its welcome this time. That was because I'm probably a little bit better than I was. Originally, I remember being very stuck on this for a long time in my first playthrough, and really struggling with a lot of the kind of set pieces, especially the compound area where you're kind of locked in. I think there's a Gatling gun in the middle or whatnot. That bit took a long time. Overall, I was generally surprised with my replay of this. I felt that the atmosphere was good. The music was exceptional. Mike is still a legend. I know I'm jumping well ahead there. And I like that kind of grungy feel that the island possessed. It felt like endgame material, and it was a welcome change from the castle, which, as I said, kind of lagged. But again, the island for me is just an island of stunlock after stunlock after stunlock. Ganados with the electric cattle prodders just have to be one of the most frustratingly tedious elements added to a game. The amount of times I was electrocuted and then killed by something else, it just wound me up so much. I was like, just leave, because they don't cause a lot of damage, the cattle prodders, but they just lock you in place, and it's like one after the other, and then eventually some twat would hit me with a gun or whatnot, and I'll be like, oh. And again, there's little bits, isn't there, like the bloody, where you're piloting the stupid little mole from Thunderbirds, and you're like, ugh. It just felt too much for me. Anyway, sorry, I'm negative about this one. Let's add a little bit more structure. You got a little bit Ada at the beginning, which is quite nice, and you're kind of building up to the story. Sadler is now introduced, thanking you for destroying Salazar in a kind of roundabout way, and you've got the opening bits. How did everyone find the island introduction and the opening parts when you're kind of breaking in to this industrial zone?
I think the island's wonderful. I honestly do. I've never really understood people's criticism with it. I think it looks wonderfully grungy and grimy, and I think it's really atmospheric the way you start off at like the bluffs right on the coastline and you work your way through this camp and slowly up the mountain, and then when you finally get inside it's all dirty, and Leon makes remarks of like how everything's rotten, and then you get to the lab with the regenerators. I just think it's wonderful. I've never really got why people don't like it.
I remember being like when the original game came out and I'd gone through the past thing, I was like preparing for the in-game, so I was expecting another section. Of course, at first when the island comes, it's like, oh, another location, and I was like, oh gosh, how long is this going to take to get through? But beyond that original thought, I've always kind of enjoyed it as a nice change of pace, and as John's alluded to, the kind of like arriving on the coast and stuff. And I think it's one of the things that even the remake gets quite right as well, is that you feel the scope and scale of another island and the location. It feels appropriate. I've never had any real problems with either. It's an odd juxtaposition to go through this very old village to a new modern kind of esque facility, but then it's like reasonably well explained in the lore, I think, and he does so in the remake. So yeah, I've never had too much problems with it, and I've always found it a reasonably fun experience. It doesn't feel as much of a slog. There's definitely some hard points, intentionally so, but nothing too bad.
Where do you sit, Stars?
Yeah, I agree. I've always generally enjoyed the island. It does occasionally suffer a little bit from combat fatigue in its later sections, but the early chapters of it are very much sort of environmental storytelling that we enjoy very much from this series. And I think once you get into the island facility proper, once you've cleared that opening melee, of which I've had a couple of quite frustrating deaths in that section, just due to the bullet damage being so much more than I thought it would be. Even with the body armor upgrades you can get, it's so crazy. Like, I was getting one-shotted by the minigun wielding Ganado. But yeah, once you get into the facility and you've got like the burning man in the oven, that section, all of that, I think is what we play Resident Evil for. It's to go around these, as John says, these grimy, dirty facilities, trying to uncover the mystery. And I think, everything we enjoyed about the sort of classic Resident Evil lab environments and stuff is realised very well in a new perspective in RE4. I think it's held up remarkably well. And I do kind of like the fact that the remake plays out a lot of the areas, but in reverse. I think it's kind of a neat spin on it.
But it's still so linear. Yes, I agree. There's a lot of environmental storytelling. There is.
It is linear, but if you're not used to that by this point in the game,
of course,
I don't know what to tell you. Yeah.
The thing that saves it is the regenerators, because I still think they're iconic and probably the best enemy in the entire game. Not only are they challenging, but their gimmick, if you want to call it that, is something almost bound in the lore. The fact that they've made something with lots of little Plagos embedded in them, so you need to kind of like take them out individually. I think that's a good gimmick, and one that works quite harmoniously with what you're trying to do. Added then with the kind of Iron Maidens and getting quite close to you and kind of like killing you that way. I think they represented a good challenge and the kind of pinnacle of what, the island section has. Everything else, as I said, apart the stun locking nature. By this time I was so, again, 20 years ago, less so now, but I was so bored of what was happening. This is why I like the regenerators, because it was different. Everything else just seemed so samey. It was like, oh, great, they've got a cattle prodder. Hey, great, here's another Gatling gun. Oh, and it was just, I was getting very bored. And so the regenerators kind of saved it for me. And I don't think I've ever really got over it. And then you get the crap like the bulldozer. And, apart from a bit of light relief where you can play with a big hook thing, you can kind of grab a couple of granadas and chuck them down the sewage plant. It's all very, as I said, grimy, grungy. And for me, this never resonated. And again, I didn't feel it particularly worked. Structurally, I didn't think it worked well. And again, something that's the remake really did sort it out. But I don't know. I also struggle with the idea of how it links in with kind of like the ruins. I'm just trying to think from a geographical point of view, with the ruins all kind of behind it. You kind of go coast, facility, then the ruins. Because you kind of lose track of which direction you're actually going, because you're just kind of following a kind of set path.
Yeah, the ruins are at the top of the island.
At the top, yeah.
Where Sadler shoots Mike's helicopter down.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
What I missed from the remake in terms of the island, because the island was really well done in the remake, but I did miss the driving section.
What?
Yeah, I just think it's really fun. Less so the bits where you've got to stop and you've got to get off and run round and open the gate, but the actual sections where Ashley's driving down the road and you're on the back, I really missed that from the remake, I'll be honest.
I'm glad someone did. Let's talk about regenerators then. How did you get on, John? Any particular interesting facets and tactics?
No, not really. Just bog standard. I just got the thermal imaging scope and used that. But like you say, the very creepy enemies, the very unnerving, that sound they make, it's very panic-inducing. But you've just sort of got to keep you calm and take them out from distance. And if they get too close, I did panic occasionally and my aim was a little bit off and I'd miss the parasite and it would get too close, and sometimes they've got a parasite on the back, so you've got to knock them down first, and if you knock them down, I forget that if you shoot the legs off, they kind of belly flop towards you and jump and grab you and do a lot of damage. But very, very effective enemies, and I think it works much better in this version that the regenerators and the Iron Maidens are separate creatures rather than merged into one as they are in the remake.
Starstar, what about you?
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. I again just grabbed the thermal imaging scope, and aside from occasionally obscure Plaga, didn't find them too bad at all. I just enjoyed, in the GameCube original, as I've shown on socials, the second view mode on the thermal scope that only exists in the GameCube version. It's pretty cool.
Explain it a bit more for other people who don't know.
And it's only in the GameCube version. I've tested this extensively now, so I know it's true. But in the GameCube version, if you pick up the thermal scope and press the X button, it changes to instead of the traditional blue, it changes to a black and white scope. It's like a secondary view mode on it or whatever. I don't know why it's been removed. I had spoken with Albert, who did the RE4 HD project a couple of years ago, and made him aware of this. I didn't really have any feedback from it, but I have made the relevant parties aware. So hopefully one day it might turn up again. That's the only interest anecdote I have at the moment, if you like. The Regenerators are a classic villain, although I did think the Iron Maiden being a mutation I thought was kind of genius when I played the remake.
Rob, how did you deal with these creatures?
I mean, at this day and age, it's pretty used to the tricks, and if they've got one on the back, it's shooting out a limb enough to knock them on the ground so that you can see as quickly as possible. Like, my only thoughts for what Sean was talking about with the scope might have been like a color differentiation. It might have been some people colorblind, might not be so easy in a black and white version, but then why it didn't get kept, I don't know. But yeah, no, I still think they're an effective enemy, and I still think that they create panic-inducing impact if you don't get the shot right. And, depending on how well you've upgraded your weaponry at this point, and if you haven't, like if you're playing it like what Sean was explaining before, then you probably just with base weapons, no changes, it's going to be a lot harder than an upgraded rifle or anything like that at this point. So it makes it slightly harder. But otherwise, yeah, good enemy for good use of the environment. A lot of those areas are also quite narrow, so does add into that whole thing as well, just as unsettling in some ways, and yeah, if you're used to it, you can kind of overcome, but still great design and great concept.
I particularly enjoyed the labs themselves. I thought they were actually very well executed, and they felt appropriate to the kind of location we were at and the level of technology that was around for a kind of small operation. It didn't feel silly, a bit like kind of Remake 2 style. It felt in line with classic Resident Evil. Chapter 5, of course, also introduces us to Krauser, who kind of appears literally out of nowhere in regards to Chapter 5, as someone who has a history with Leon, which we are not privy to and won't be privy to until Dark Side Chronicles. And this is where we get two fights with Krauser, so we can kind of take them both. First is the QTE battle, which I think famously has ended a few people's lives over the years. It was one I wasn't particularly looking forward to, but I think I remember it being more difficult than it actually was. I was very apprehensive going into it, and I was, oh god. But actually, I didn't struggle too much. Once you've learned roughly what order it's going to go in, I didn't have too many problems with this. But anyone have any problems with the first one, or?
It was all right for me. I think I had one death because I pressed the wrong prompt. We've talked about how these Q2Es are a bit outdated and annoying, but it's still quite effective as a sequence. You know, when you do it successfully, you do feel some sense of satisfaction from it.
Yep.
This is the element where QTEs really always shone, even in you go back to something like Shenmue and so forth, when it felt like part of the actual action of the scene, as opposed to just a reaction to something that was going on. And I think that's why it's been such a memorable QTE for the history of QTEs, is that it actually feels like an interactive cutscene where your actions have consequences or your lack of actions have consequences, and I think that still holds up to this day.
This is the first kind of hint that there was a bit of a storyline happening in Resident Evil 4, where we got some hint of an Umbrella revival, which kind of came out of nowhere. Stars, how did you find the first battle?
I've always loved this sequence. I think it's directed really well. As a QTE, it doesn't bother me because I just find it so much fun, because just watching the choreography and everything like that is great. You talk about the lore implications, and did you not have a hard eye roll when Umbrella's mentioned in the same game they're removed? It's just like, come on, what is going on? And, you know, at this point, with Krauser saying all for Umbrella's sake, you could feasibly still believe it's the same Umbrella, which obviously the second encounter will reveal it's not so much. But yeah, I think Krauser's really good in the original. I think the retroactive storytelling we get of his character in Operation Javier in Darkside Chronicles is masterful as well. And I find that all the more tragic all of this gets undone in the remake, because I do not find Krauser. I think Krauser's placement in the remake is better. I think it makes way more sense bringing him in at an earlier point in the story and having him do what he does. But I find him a lesser character as such, because there just doesn't seem to be as much nuance or as much depth there.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, to me, it just seemed like we need another boss, more so than anything else. We're jumping ahead a little bit, but like the second battle with Krauser, I remember being not excited, but you know, you kind of worked out that he was with Wesker and stuff, and seeing the Wesker drones from Code Veronica kind of return was a nice little touch. The second fight is intense, and still is to this day. The fact that it's timed, I think, adds an extra kind of nuance to the battle, because he does take a lot of hits, and again, there's lots of strategy involved in what you want to do. You know, he's got his arm guard, whatever you want to call it, and it's a nice build up to that particular point. It takes a long time before you kind of get up to the top of the tower that's all set up, and when I was playing it, I was unsure as to where I kind of needed to go and whether I was going to make it out in time, because I wasn't 100% aware of the layout and the geography of all this settings. I was kind of going down the steps after defeating him going, is this the right way? I don't know. The time was ticking down. I was like, is this oh, there it is, and I made it out, but I wasn't 100% sure, which was quite a nice feeling to have, replaying it after all these times. What was everyone's approach to this kind of second battle? What weapon of choice? Mine was certainly the Magnum, as best I could.
There's only one weapon of choice, Nick. Do you honestly struggle with this one?
Yeah.
You didn't take Leon's advice to Ada.
What, with a knife?
Yeah, because you basically mitigate this entire fight's difficulty if you just use the knife. Like, he doesn't even get a hit on you. It's over in, like, less than 40 seconds.
What, on the top of the tower?
Yeah, you just knife. Because it will instant stagger him. You can follow it with a QT or just stand your ground with a knife. And then when he charges you again, just swing your knife again, he'll fall back, stagger.
Really?
With the Wii version is actually the easiest, because you just run straight up to him and just swing like a madman.
Oh, I made it hard for myself.
I might have even done it on one of my stream ones, yeah, but if you just use the knife, it's incredibly overpowered. It negates it as a boss fight, really.
I was flicking between shotgun, Magnum.
Interestingly, I went through a little bit of what you're describing, because if I followed up this playthrough with Assignment Ada, and if people aren't aware, listeners aren't aware, we're going to do a Separate Ways coverage later in the year as part of the anniversary celebrations, but I did Assignment Ada as part of this playthrough, and at this point in the game's history, Ada in the GameCube version couldn't use a knife. She's not able to do it in Assignment Ada for some reason. It was added in later versions, and I actually did struggle with Krauser in Assignment Ada because I had to resort to traditional techniques that I wasn't familiar with, so like trying to snipe him or trying to use a pistol on him while he's lunging and dashing from side to side, I think is probably a little bit of what you went through there.
Yeah, it is tricky. Batman, did you use the knife or did you have another tactic?
Yeah, I used the knife. But what I like most about this boss encounter is the actual setting, you know, on these beautiful ruins with the flaming torches everywhere. The sky's starting to get a little bit lighter. You're back on the coast. You can see the sea and you get that sort of ambient wind noise in the background. I think it's really, really atmospheric. And you get a nice build-up as well with the file you pick up just before the fight where Krauser says he doesn't trust Ada and he's going to kill her and Leon and send their bodies to Wesker. And, you know, it felt like the story was finally kicking into gear a little bit. It was just such a shame, as you said, that Krauser was retrospectively added to the storyline, because if in 2005 he was, you know, a proper returning character, then I think people's excitement would have gone through the roof. But yeah, for the actual boss fight itself, I just used the knife and he went down very, very easily, and I had plenty of time to get to the gate before the timer ran out.
Rob?
The Krauser fight was somewhat taxing for me, and I don't know why. I've never done particularly well with it, and now hearing there's some tactics I may try the next time I go back. I always like the design of it, and I like the layout of it going through, and it's one of the things I was a little bit upset with the remake, going back to that sort of thing and some of the changes on it, but I thought it was a fun fight. I didn't particularly have too much in the way of problems, but I did die at one point just through stupidity more than anything else, being a bit overzealous. He's a bit of a big showboater in this, and I kind of like that too. It kind of works really well for him. He's kind of blasting off taunts at Leon constantly, which I've always thought was hilarious. And there's a great setting with some really good designs.
Well, let's continue with you, Rob. What about It? How did you get on with It?
This is going to be blasphemous because I know a lot of people have liked that section, and when it originally didn't appear in the remake, they particularly felt bad, and obviously it ended up being repurposed. I've never really enjoyed it, and I didn't really enjoy that fight still. It's going back to what we were talking about before with in regards to like the additional bits of just like another section to make something last longer. Kind of the same thing, I think.
Starstarrant, how did you find It?
Once you get out of the hanging cages, I really quite enjoy it. I think it's really good fight on the actual thing, but the cages I just find overly stressful and annoying. It's one of those sections that I really condemn the game for just being a section that's designed to just waste your resources before you get to the boss fight. And you can try and dodge it, but you will nearly always get a cheap hit in. So you're hemorrhaging health if you're trying to save on ammo. Again, it's that reality as well. It's like, who the fuck builds these hanging cages? What is their purpose? Everything about it just feels so video gamey to a fault. And I know we're acknowledging like Resident Evil 4 OG is a video game, but we're trained in the Resident Evil mindset, aren't we? We like our environmental storytellings and things like that. Well, what's the environmental storytellings of these massive hanging cages under the ground that have gates that, you know, nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. I like how they reworked Fight for the remake. I do. It has absolutely no backstory or lore in the original. It's just a monster. Although, interestingly, they call it the U3, don't they? And then in RE5, it's called... the big spider thing is called U8. So
yes,
in the remake, is it called the U3 still?
No.
So the U8 thing in 5 now doesn't have the tenuous link it did do previously. No. Well done, Capcom. I guess.
Batman, how did you find It?
Yeah, it was okay. I had a couple of deaths. I mean, the whole sequence is nonsense, isn't it, as you've already said? But it kind of gets a free pass because, again, it's very good at generating panic, you know, when the countdown comes on. And then the second part of the battle, I don't really have much time for it, really. It's just a question of getting the dodging right when he comes up out of the ground. And then I usually trap him between the gates and just unload on him before he uses his snapping pincer things to destroy the gate. But I've never really found the U3 too difficult. It's just very, very good at generating tension in the first part of the battle with the timed drops of each cage.
So, it seems you killed Krauser too. How shall I return my appreciation?
What are you talking about? I thought he was with you.
What are you talking about? Did you really think I'd trust an American? To tell you the truth, I was contemplating how to get rid of him. But thanks to you, that's no longer necessary.
You were just using him right from the start.
Oh, I must hand it to you. You've demonstrated quite a bit of promise by killing Krauser. When your assimilation with Las Plagas is complete, I'll have you serve as my guard.
Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to decline your generous offer. I have prior engagements.
Enjoy your smart-mouthing while you can.
All right, well, that kind of leads on towards the end of the game where we have the kind of final sequence with Mike. Yeah, that's always sad, isn't it? When he falls to his death.
The thing is, Nick, he knew a good bar.
He did.
And we, as a Resident Evil community, will depart this life not knowing what that bar is.
Yeah.
We didn't know if it was a happening bar.
No. Could have been. It probably was. Knowing Mike, knowing it as we did. It always comes out of nowhere, really, the line. Should it have been Ark? I don't know. I would have been very upset if it had been Ark. Ark!
But he would have had a sense of closure, the poor lad. But, you know, at the moment, Ark is still flying as long as he still has fuel.
That's it. Directly from Survivor with the kids on board, and it's like, Ark, no! And Lot and Lily are in there as well. I go, no! Brutal.
Did people prefer Mike being shot out of the sky by an RPG, or do they prefer the Novistador's departure that the remake offers? Thoughts?
I think I prefer the rocket launcher because it's kind of like a proper fuck you from Sadler, whereas the Novistadors just appear out of nowhere on the island.
I agree. I think the rocket launcher version feels more in line with the sort of militaristic angle that the game had gone for at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other way around, it just feels like it happened because they were there, not because Sadler's forces were prepared to take down militarized attack on the island. It is a fortified location, so yeah, I agree.
I felt originally, back in the day, that like adding Mike to the final sections, the sort of big combat sections, were a really, really nice antidote to the combat fatigue I was feeling, which made it all the more disappointing that both the OG and the remake then section up with another action set piece section, grabbing the key cards and unlocking the final gate. But I do think as a sequence with Mike, it is kind of masterful, and it should have been the final sort of capping set piece. I think they really, really shot themselves in the foot by doing another one on top of this, because this feels like the action crescendo that the game was building to.
Yes, after the IT boss, you're kind of ready to go. You get the Mike section, you're like, oh, okay, great. And then you've got that extra bit, and you're like, oh, God's sake, hurry up. But you eventually get through, and you end up with Sadler. Tactics then for Sadler. Ada has been captured. She needs rescuing. Leon nearly kills her with a knife. She drops quite a long way onto what I hope for her sake was mattresses, but it didn't look like it. How did everyone approach this? There's quite a few options you can do with regards to the the kind of dropping areas. You can run to the other side, pick up ammo. I suppose you could go for a knife section in the eye, but take out the eyes. I personally was stuck with as much magnum ammo as I could possibly have and just aim that at each eye until that triggered the cutscene. Then I did use the knife on the big eye, with that kind of cutscene, and that seemed to do quite a lot of damage. I kind of saved the magnum for the eyes. If I was running out of that or I needed to reload, I would then switch to the shotgun and shotgun his body, and then that kind of staggered him back a little bit, then reload the magnum and go for the eyes when they became available. That was always quite satisfying when you got a magnum shot on the eye and you got the nice kind of orange gunk which kind of like oozed out, and that triggered the kind of him falling to his kind of rest position where you could then hit him with a knife. Didn't find it taxing the first time I did it back 20 years ago, and I didn't find it particularly difficult this time. And once we got the classic Ada rocket launcher, that was it. Did anyone have any difficulties with this one?
No, all I do is I save my ammo until I use some of the environment, so that you can operate the cranes to swing the girders into him and stuff like that, and then I use sniper rifle or the magnum into the eye and inflict massive damage. I really love this fight. I think it's another example of the OG trumping over the remake. I think the rain. I can't get enough of this one. People say I'm crazy, but I genuinely feel this is one of the final boss highlights of the series. I really love the Sadler fight.
I agree with you, Sean. I prefer the original over the remake's version of events. It's not that the remake version's bad, it's just not as good as the original, I think.
I just think it's too overdone, the remake. It adds too much, whereas the simplicity of the original battle just feels so timeless, it feels climactic. I just love it. It's not particularly hard, as you've said, Nick, but
especially considering you can take that rocket launcher from the earlier part of the game and use use that to weaken them straight away. But that's kind of the cool thing about that if you've held on to it for that long, that you can do that.
But what's also interesting in an invert to that is you can actually defeat Sadler traditionally with your weapons and save the super rocket launcher for the next playthrough that Ada throws you.
It's also true.
Batman, what did you do?
Just hit and hope, really. I don't really have any tactics for this battle. I just spray him with the TMP, hope I hit one of his eyeballs, and I used the switches and smashed into him with the girders a few times as well. But yeah, considering it's the final boss in the game, it's certainly one of the easiest, I would say.
I agree with what Sean said. It is quite climactic. I do prefer the original over the remake as well. In the remake, there's like Novastas and stuff flying around. You're like, I haven't got time for that. You know, this keeps it quite on point. But yeah, it's not challenging. I think even it's probably a little bit more challenging than Sadler at times. Certainly I found Krauser more difficult, but that was probably down to my tactics. But I did like it. And the reality is, though, we then come up against the real end boss of this game, and that is a tidal wave. Honestly,
I remember you said you struggled with this.
Jesus Christ, monkey balls. Because you're so happy, and then they decide, let's copy Metal Gear Solid with a kind of end bit. I could not. 3 times, 4 times, I was getting this wrong, and I don't know what I was doing trying to escape from this bloody island. It just kept catching up with me, and I was like, come on, go faster, go faster. And I was just crashing. It was really, really frustrating, the jet ski bit. It really was. I don't know why. I don't know what's wrong with me. But I just couldn't get it. I couldn't master it properly, and I kept crashing and dying, and I wasn't happy. But that was my playthrough from Resident Evil 4. And I was quite happy to come out with, I can't remember. Did I say, I sent a picture. Was it an E? Was it a grade E? And I was over the moon. Rob, I assume you had no problems with the jet ski.
Not at all.
Yeah.
So it's pretty easy.
Batman?
I didn't have any issues, no. I just gunned the engine and it was fine.
Sure.
Nick, not only did I do it effortlessly, I was doing the trick jumps as well. The somersaults or whatever you can do with the jet ski.
I feel it's very wave race inspired.
Yeah. I will say though, in the remake, it's a bastard. There's a trophy you can get for like not hitting any debris and stuff like that, and I just still don't think I've got it yet.
Come on. Let's go home.
Sounds like a great idea. Mission accomplished. Right, Leon?
Not quite. I still have to get you home safe.
So, after you take me back to my place, how about we do some, overtime?
Sorry.
Somehow I knew you'd say that, but it doesn't hurt to ask, you know? So, who was that woman anyway?
Why do you ask?
Come on, tell me.
She's like a part of me I can't let go. Let's leave it at that.
There we go, ladies and gentlemen. That is our playthrough of Resident Evil 4. We've had ups and downs, trials and tribulations, and I hope you've learned a few things about tactics and strategies you could use in future playthroughs. Let's do some final thoughts from the team then about where you feel 20 years on this game fits. And as I said, with a kind of unique circumstance that we've already got a remake of this, unlike the others. So, Rob, we'll start with you. How did you find generally the playthrough? Were you impressed by it? Do you think it's still held up? Or do you think it's been well and truly trounced?
No, I don't think it's been well and truly trounced. I think it would be an unfair thing. There are definitely things where the remake excels, where they've had chance to look at a gameplay design and improve it. And there's other things where, I mean, I can't say they didn't do differently with intent, but definitely the original kind of holds. I think the other thing that there is very much a different gameplay style, and we've talked about this very early on in regards to like character response and stuff. It's a sort of gameplay style that while the remake kind of apes the general concept of it, it's still a very different game. And to go back to the original was to go back and find something that either you probably enjoyed a lot back 20 years ago or whenever you played it, in the last 20 years, as opposed to a modern gameplay style that's very different. And I still kind of like it for what it is. It's got a sort of snappy response and a sort of gameplay loop that is very much of itself, and it's why it was so well received upon its release. the plot is narratively bare bones, but it also has some extra bits that the remake doesn't have, and vice versa. And as an experience, it's still fun. It's a particularly overlong game, and there's definitely parts of it that outstay its welcome. There are some very puzzling choices in regards to some of the design choices, but they were also probably born of the idea of trying to make the best game at the time that you'll question now. But it is an experience. I still recommend it. And the fact that you can still play this version alongside the remake quite readily is a good thing. Like, it's great that you don't necessarily have to do what we've all done and gone back to older versions, that you can still play a reasonably good version of this game to this day. If you've got the GameCube version, it sounds like you're in for both a treat of design, but also perhaps some difficulty spikes that were ironed out in later versions. I would highly recommend, if you're playing the PC version, that you don't just play the bare bones version, either the old one or the 2014 Ultimate HD version, I use in air quotes, and use the fan mods, because I think inherently what I've seen of that is definitely one of the best ways to play it with a modern lens, but still have that maintained original gameplay style.
Batman, what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed this playthrough. I mean, it's such a special game, the original Resident Evil 4. And I really enjoyed the remake. I would say out of the 3 recent remakes, Resident Evil 4 was the strongest for me. But going back to this one just reinforced how good it is and how it saved the series, and is probably the reason why the series is still going on to this day. It's just such a fun game to pick up and play. Yes, the story's bollocks, etc., but in terms of just sheer enjoyment, this is right up there at the top of the series for me. Yeah, just really, really enjoyed it.
I think from my point of view, the good news is that I enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to enjoy it. That being said, I won't go back to it readily, should I say. I still found it a chore. I still found it quite dull in places. Once you kind of got over the kind of panic and the fear of survival panic, I found it became a bit monotonous, and I liked some of the gameplay gimmicks, such as the regenerators I've spoken about, and things like the Garrador I found quite interesting. But overall, I got tired of the same Ganado or the sheer number of the same creature, basically. And I think that's something Resident Evil historically is balanced quite well in older games as they go along. Yes, you still get zombies, but they're kind of used more sparingly, and this just felt like they're just putting more in just because they could, and at the expense of quite a linear experience. And, you know, I think the game starts off very strongly. The village is good, and parts of the castle are good, parts of the island are good, but there's too much gumph in the middle for me that doesn't feel like Resident Evil did at the time. And whilst I prefer Remake 4 in every conceivable way, that doesn't mean I rate Remake 4 higher in the sense that it's still not, for me, what Resident Evil is about. But I agree 100% with what Batman says. It did save the series. It was much needed. So I respect it enormously as a game. But for me, it's between 4, 5, and 6. These are the 3 games I dislike the most in terms of the main game series. And sadly, my playthrough has not changed that view in any way, although I still believe it's like the best opening level, and it's brought so much to the table that you can't help but agree with what people say about how it is a great game, because I can see how it is a great game. I can see why people like it. I can see that, generally speaking, the balancing is quite good throughout the game, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I would have liked, but I did enjoy it more for this 20th anniversary playthrough and respect it even more now. Stars, we're going to end with a positive vibe because that's how we like to end on the podcast. Go on, what's your final thoughts 20 years on?
Again, we started off this podcast by saying we didn't want to compare the two necessarily, but I find myself in a bit of a catch-22 with RE4 now, because if you do directly compare the two games, then I do find that Remake 4, as much as I hate to admit it, is probably the superior experience. It tells the story better, the characters are more rounded, but there is something timeless about this original game, and when you play it, you know, not to sound elitist or, you know, like a knobhead, but when you play it on a CRT, there's something about that experience, playing it in the dark with the glow of that TV. It does transport you back 20 years and you put back through those feelings. So I went through a wash of emotions, and hilariously, I'd used the wrong cable when I'd set the GameCube up. I'd originally used the composite cable instead of my gold-plated SCART, and as a result, the colours seemed really washed out and grey. And at first, I was saying, "This is fucking brilliant! Like, look how how oppressive this palette is. I was even sharing some images, and then I was like, oh, I found the SCART cable, guys, and there is more colour than I thought, but it's still kind of oppressive, and it still kind of works with what it's trying to do. It's a lot less a jaunt through the summertime like the remake is, and the GameCube controller and everything lends itself to just being a quintessential experience. And I suppose all I want to say is, for the happy birthday of Resident Evil 4 is, cheers, you fucked up the series almost beyond recognition, but you transformed an entire gaming generation. And without you, there's so many series that wouldn't be what they are today. Even Cliff Blazensky, however you pronounce his name, he cites the entire series like Gears of War were what they were because of Resident Evil 4. So its impact on the industry is legendary. No remake was ever going to do that. A remake of something like this could only ever hope to be just simply a good game, and thankfully we got that as well. But Resident Evil 4, for all of its faults, for all of the damage it did, is still in so many ways a timeless masterpiece. Even if I don't like it as much as I should do at times, I still think it's pretty good. So I've thoroughly enjoyed this playthrough. Is it the best way to play it? It's still the GameCube original. You do miss separate ways, which we'll get onto when we revisit this game later in the year. But for now, happy birthday. You changed an industry, and not many games can say that.
And on that bombshell, we end and move on to this podcast edition of Neptune's Biohazard Quiz.
The ultimate test of Resident Evil knowledge returns. 100 podcasts later.
Jesus Christ. What fucking question is that?
I'm getting a big fat 0 this week.
Yeah, I'm not going to get any of these.
I'm not going to say anything because I know that you will just change the answer or something. Like, you don't even know what the answers are.
Can I just ask, have you had all of these questions independently verified?
And still things don't quite go to plan.
You only have to probably get it right.
Welcome to Neptune's Biohazard Quiz. Batman. Star Tyrants. George Trevor. Robbie McGregor. Mr. Spencer. Neptune's Biohazard Quiz.
Welcome one and all for a particularly fiendish edition of Neptune's Biohazard Quiz. We've had two very challenging questions in from one of our patrons, but we have a couple of Resident Evil 4 themed questions, so clear your desktops. You can open up Notepad. Let's go. Question number 1. Name all the components that make up the Salazar crown. So 3 things can be combined to make the Salazar crown. What are they? Question number 2. How many times do you encounter Dr. Salvador in a normal playthrough? How many times do you find Chainsaw Man? Question number 3. This is the first question from Lunapocalypse. In 1999, Moby Dick released the Resident Evil 3 action figure line, with each pack coming with a part of the Nemesis final form you could build if you collected all the action figures. What Nemesis part came with Jill in the Regina costume versus Brainsucker pack?
Christ.
I'll explain that again. So
that is outrageous.
With the Resident Evil 3 action figure line, each pack came with a part of the Nemesis final form. If you collected them all, you basically got a free Nemesis Final Form version. So what Nemesis part came with the Jill with Regina costume versus the Brainsucker bit? It is guessable. You can have a guess. Obviously, there's only a certain few things it could be.
Can you at least give us a clue? Is it accessories or body part?
Body part.
Oh, fucking
so it's the Nemesis Final Form. So there's a few things it could be. Okay. This one's even worse from Lunapocalypse. So question number 4. In the introduction cinematic to the Underbelly scenario, obviously that bit's in first person mode, there is a shop on the right hand side that has green awnings. What is that shop called? You know, the one you get that really clear view of as you're running down the street. Yeah, thanks for that. And finally, question number 5. How many Plaga types have existed in the main non-remake timeline? So how many Plaga types have existed in the main non-remake timeline? They're the 5 questions. Join us after this and we'll run through those answers. So, welcome back to Neptune's Biohazard Quiz. A tricky quiz, I think you'll all agree, gentlemen. Let's see how well everyone has done. So, question number 1 was name all the components of the Salazar crown. Let's start with Stars Tyrant.
I seem to think there's 2, and it's the crown and the thing you attach to it, which I can't remember its name. Like, is it the Salazar pendant or something? I don't know. I've no idea.
Okay.
I don't know.
Romby?
I think it's the family insignia, but I think the other bit is just 2 jewels, but I can't remember what colours they are or anything like that, but it's just 2 jewels and insignia.
2 jewels and insignia, okay. Batman?
I had crown, I had royal insignia, and some sort of jewel, but I didn't know what it was.
It's points to Batman with a full house there, absolutely. It's the King's Crown, the royal insignia, and crown jewel. I'm going to give half a point to Stars Tyrant for getting 2 out of the 3. Romby, not good enough, I'm afraid. Well done, well done. Question number 2. How many times do you encounter Dr. Salvador in the normal playthrough? Batman?
I think it's 4.
4, okay. Romby?
I'm thinking 3, but now I'm doubting that. But I'm going to stick with 3.
Stars Tyrant?
6.
Points to Stars Tyrant, it is 6. Well done, absolutely fantastic.
I've got them if you want them. I've written them down. I wrote them by hand.
Go on, enlighten us all.
So you get the initial one when you grab the shotgun. If you try and leave through the other gate, there's another one waiting for you as you come in the opening village encounter. There's the one as you leave the chief's house, and then there's 3 in the mines, because you get 1 on the minecart chase, you get 1 as you're into the sort of main catacomb bit, and then there's another one as you go down the stairs.
Yeah.
Before you unlock the door.
I did slightly different. I was trying to trick you a little bit. So there's only 1 in the village. You can get the second, but I don't think you can get both in the same go.
I don't know. I think you can. If you dispatch 1 and then try and go for the gate, the other one will appear.
Okay. Otherwise, Mendez
You have
house.
to kill the first one first.
Test that out. Outside Mendez house, the mine in chapter 4-2. There's 2 in the sand ruins in a normal playthrough, and in the minecart. So 6 in total. Question number 3 was the Moby Dick RE3 question. So, what part of the Nemesis came with Jill in the Regina costume versus Brainsucker action figure pack? What part of the Nemesis? Let's start with Romby.
Oh, God. I have no idea. I don't remember these at all. No, I've got no idea. Maybe a tentacle or an arm or something. I don't know.
Tentacle. Okay, Stars Tyrant.
A total guess. I said legs.
Legs. Batman.
Head.
Hope for the head. Point to Romby. It is the tentacle. I've got photographic proof if you want to see it later. But yes, correct.
I have no recollection of this toy at all. So,
question number 4 was in the intro, in the cinematic introduction for Underbelly. What is the name of the shop on the right-hand side with the green awning? If anyone gets this, there's something wrong with them. Stars Tyrant.
It's very obviously Costco.
Yes. Batman.
I thought it was Boots.
Boots. Yeah. Robbie.
I'm not even going for a word. I'm just going for Arcus Taylors.
No, Little Michaels. Of course. Of course.
Yeah.
Little Michaels is the answer you're looking for. And finally, question number 5. How many Plaga types have existed in the main non-remake timeline? Now, this is based on John's work, so hopefully John should get the full mark here. Romby, how many are there?
I have no idea. We're going to say 5.
5. Okay. Stars Tyrant?
Are we talking about like the parasites or the
Yes,
the versions that describes? Oh God, 4
types. Okay, Batman.
Oh, 4.
4. That's incorrect. There has been seven types of plaguers that have existed. Come on, this is your work. I got this off the encyclopedia. So there's the subordinate and dominant from RE4. There's types 2, 3, and 4 from RE5, and then there's the cultivated one from Damnation, and the recessive one from Umbrella Corp.
Fair enough.
7.
Yeah,
your work.
Lunar Apocalypse. I'm just watching the Underbelly clip. This is absolute fucking madness. It is barely visible. It's barely even eligible as Little Michael. I'm not even sure if it is. That is absolutely. This is bonkers. This is. Nick, come on.
I said it was
13?
I've seen an image. Let's have a look at those final. It was a very low scoring, and in joint last place was Romby and Batman with just a solitary point. But this podcast winner with 1.5, it's a deserved win for Stars Tyrant. Well done.
Yeah,
I'm just lucky. I just guessed a tentacle. I didn't even know that answer. I don't think I deserved that point.
Don't even watch the Underbelly cutscene, guys. It will make you angry. There's no way.
Join us next time when we'll have some more questions. There we go. We are rapidly coming to an end of our Happy Birthday of Resident Evil 4 podcast. We hope everyone has enjoyed it and reflected on this truly epic game of both the gaming and the Resident Evil fandom. Coming up next, as Sean's alluded to, at some point we'll be looking at separate ways in a bit more detail, such as the importance of separate ways. I think it certainly deserves its own little mention. And of course we will be looking as well at 10 years of Revelations 2, which is always exciting as it's a bit of a fan favourite here on the podcast. But I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for listening. And it is goodbye from me, Neptune.
Goodbye from me, Batman.
Goodbye from me, Stars Tyrant.
And goodbye from me, Romby.